Welcome. Looks like we're live. Today we're going to do a fun Spider-Man live chat with a good friend of the show, Doug Ernst. Hey, Doug, what's going on, man?
Hey, thanks for having me again. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome. We're going to talk a little bit about more comics this time rather than just be all about you. So it should be a good time. Also with us, it looks like, Doc, did you support a crowdfunding campaign?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to do that while Doug was here so that I could show some support behind Soul Finder.
Oh, wow. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Not a problem, dude.
You just kicked us over $25,000.
All right.
So you're the one who put us over the edge. Thank you. That's very cool.
Yep. You're welcome, man.
I think it was about 16,000. It was about 16,000 when I joined up. Yeah, it was about 16. Awesome. 25,000.
If you haven't supported Soul Finder Demons match yet on Indiegogo, get with it. It's a great show, or it's going to be a great book. I've got a preview on the channel and an interview with Doug Ernst if you need more convincing. And it looks like Doc is the latest to sign up and put the campaign over 25,000. Awesome achievement. Also, not the first time on the channel, but the first time on Comics Aficionados, Real Comic Stacks. What's going on, buddy? Uh-oh.
He's making coffee.
He must be making coffee. Trust me,
we'll get back to
Stacks is going to be here eventually. Also with us, we got Bats. What's going on, man?
What's up? What's up?
He's got the good shirt on. If you're prone to seizures, look away when Bats is talking, and you'll be doing better for it. And finally, resident retail expert Pele. What's going on, man?
Good morning, everybody. It's a beautiful Saturday morning here in sunny East Tennessee. We're going to have partly cloudy skies, 10% chance of rain, and it's going to be so damn hot that you might as well stay inside, and go outside, you will die.
Apparently, that's the forecast in Pittsburgh as well.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to have a nice big Spider-Man discussion ranging from the beginning all the way to current age Spider-Man. Before that, a big Spider-Man movie came out recently. Stacks ain't with us. Pele, did you get to go see it yet?
The new Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Yes, I did. We very much enjoyed that. That was it was. I don't think it was as good in some ways as Homecoming, but it definitely had its moments. I liked the villain. I thought that the twist in it was kind of not really that great, but the action was superb. So I thought it was good. It was good. We enjoyed it. We had a kick out of it. I think it really helps when you have somebody that's very enthusiastic about a film with you, because that becomes infectious. I think that if I'd probably seen it on my own or with someone who was, less enthused, less excited for the film, it would have been more mediocre. But the environment I was in and the people I was with, it really improved it.
So does the fact that Peter's motivations have less to do with his Uncle Ben passing and more to do with meeting Tony Stark Iron Man, does that change the character too much for you?
He still has the mentor. He still has the person, that influence, that parental influence, I guess you could say. And really it comes from similar, I guess you could say this, if not exactly the same place, a very similar place, in that he wants to keep up the side. He doesn't want to let the old man down. So, it's very similar motivations. I think that in place of Uncle Ben, Tony became almost like another father to him. So,
All right. Does anyone else watch Spider-Man Far From Home? Anyone else have thoughts?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought Mysterio was great. I thought Jake Gyllenhaal was perfect casting for that. He did so good with that character, and the way they depicted it on screen, and the tie-in to MCU continuity with the barf technology from Tony Stark, I thought all of that was really well done. And basically, this Tony Stark's ego is still out there creating villains in the MCU that are, top tier guys in the MCU. Mysterio was great. I think this film is getting a lot of backlash, similar to what Homecoming did about the teen angst stuff. But I think it's going to slowly move away from that, especially with that big reveal at the end with Peter Parker's identity being thrown out there everywhere. He's going to have to grow up quick, and I think that's going to put a hard shift on the current Spider-Man storyline. So
My wife commented that she's like, "Oh my God, aren't you glad that Ultron didn't have barf? Because if Ultron had the barf system, they'd have been effed."
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you're right. They would have.
All right, so I think Bats, you saw it as well. What are your quick thoughts on Spider-Man: Far From Home?
If you could miss every mark possible when it comes to a Spider-Man film, they doubled it.
So you weren't as enthused?
No. Yeah, if it's just, it's not Spider-Man. It's what was his name? The Night Monkey. It's a Night Monkey movie. It's definitely has nothing to do with Spider-Man other than the fact that it's called Spider-Man.
That Night Monkey bit was hilarious, though. That was funny. That was a hilarious part of the movie.
And I just feel kind of like, if you're gonna do a Spider-Man movie, you need the key elements for Spider-Man to be Spider-Man, and if those key elements aren't there, then it's not Spider-Man.
Wasn't that kind of like the point, though? That's what threw him off, and that's what kind of it wasn't the typical Spider-Man movie, so it made him uncomfortable, and it these themes and situations put him kind of like a fish out of water kind of situation.
No, I'm saying more like, I feel like if you don't say Uncle Ben in a Spider-Man story, like in any given Spider-Man story arc, Uncle Ben, it goes back to Uncle Ben. And so, like, if the only reference to Uncle Ben is a suitcase that he ends up losing, what's the point? It's like, if Uncle Ben was the most important person in your life and you lost his suitcase, you'd be more distraught about losing like something that belonged to him, especially like a teenage kid. And so he's just like, yeah, I just happened to lose a suitcase. Yeah, I lost my underwear. No big deal.
All right. So we got 2 yays. We got a nay for Spider-Man: Far From Home. Doug, I know you're a huge Spider-Man fan, but you're passing on the movie. Why is that?
Yeah, well, I shouldn't say so much pass. Even with the last Avengers Endgame, I held off on that, and for weeks and weeks, I didn't see it opening weekend. That was like the first. Actually, I did not see Captain Marvel, and then for Endgame, I just waited a really long time to see it. And this is the same way where, I don't know, it's just the direction that I see things going in, and listening to Kevin Feige and then Sony. I don't really trust Sony to begin with. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, I might see it, I'll get around to it, but I'm in no hurry to give them my money these days. Just so it's one of these things where I've heard a lot of good things about the general tone about this particular movie, and then obviously the criticism that we just heard about, the Uncle Ben stuff. Like, I've heard things like that. So I think it's going to be one of these mixed bags for me. And as long as it's a mixed bag, I'm just in no rush to get out and give them money these days. So I was thinking about seeing it this weekend, and then like tonight's the Pacquiao fight. So I might actually see Pacquiao instead. I'm not sure, but I don't know. I'm just not really enthused about the future of some of these superhero movies.
It's interesting you bring Pacquiao up, because I'm in a conundrum. The entire country is going to be watching this fight, so I can drive anywhere with no traffic. But I'm also a huge boxing fan, so what am I supposed to do?
Exactly.
So
find the best venue to see it.
I'll be watching the fight in the morning with my wife and her family, and we'll have fun. I think he might have bitten off more than he can chew with Keith Thurman, but man, he's proved me wrong plenty of times. So hopefully that's a good one. But I think we've talked about the movie long enough. We're here to talk about comics, man. This is the Comics Aficionados, and we're here to talk about Spider-Man. So first, I want to talk to just have everyone give their brief thoughts on what Spider-Man is to them and what it means to the comic book industry in their minds. So Stax, what's Spider-Man mean to you, and what do you think his overall place is in the comic book industry?
For me, honestly, I didn't. Growing up, Spider-Man wasn't my favorite character. It was I grew up 80s, 90s, big on X-Men and mutants, Wolverine, Gambit, the whole, all those guys. And Spider-Man was always a character I liked. But as I grew up and learned about responsibility, and it meant more to me as I got older. And I didn't actually start trying to collect Spider-Man comics until way down the road. I mean, early 90s, Spider-Man was kind of almost overshadowed by the characters being introduced in his books, like Venom and Carnage. The marketing was so much more towards the symbiotes that it was a little bit of overload. But for me, it's that sense of that never giving up, that responsibility that is overwhelming to where you can't win. He's always constantly the small guy that can't do everything, and he just happens his way through life trying the best he can. And it just as I've gotten older, it resonates me more and more.
Awesome. So that's what Stack's got to say about Spider-Man. Doug, I know you are a huge Spider-Man fan. What does Spider-Man mean to you, and what do you think his place is in the comic book industry?
So, like I said, the last time we spoke, I literally learned to read on Spider-Man comic books. So my entire life is in many ways shaped being my vocation as being a writer. You could trace it in many ways back to Spider-Man comic books, because that's where I learned to read, being creative. So that's a huge chunk of my life. And then, as people have said before, if you grow up and you just have with great power comes great responsibility beaten into your head since 4 years old, 5 years old, or whatever the heck it is, like those are psychological seeds that are going to bear fruit. So there's that element. And then I was just thinking about this. I never really thought about it until you guys were talking about Uncle Ben so much, but I grew up, my grandmother actually lived with us since I was born. So it's one of those things where he's always a little bit of an old soul. And I think when you grow up with old people, with elderly people, it has a way of aging you more quickly than if you haven't. I don't know if any of you guys grew up with elderly people or whatever, and thinking of like the loss of Uncle Ben, and I don't know, that's something where I'd have to like almost turn that over, whereas something that attracted me to the character in terms of having those sorts of elderly figures in his life and how that transformed him. So that was another element I think that probably drew me towards him. And then obviously he's just an icon that generations and generations of people grew up with, and it looks like he's safe for at least another generation now. So it's pretty cool.
Awesome. So Pele, you're a lifelong comic book reader. Your love of the medium has driven you to open up your own comic book shop. What does Spider-Man mean to you, and what influences has he had on you in the industry?
I was when I was a little kid, Daredevil was my favorite, and it kind of stayed that way for quite a long time. It's unusual because Spider-Man's more of a bright and hopeful figure, but for whatever reason I really latched on to Daredevil. But then I read ASM 122 or 121 and 122, the death of Gwen Stacy and the death and the apparent death of Green Goblin. And I don't know, it was kind of at a time in my life that I was changing. You know, my way that I was thinking was changing, and it really had an incredible impact on me. I had also recently lost someone as a relative who was close to me, as my great grandfather, and it's that point in time in a person's life when they're a child and they realize that at some point they're going to die, and that had a profound impact on me. And for several weeks, I was, kind of mulling it over in my, 7 or 8 year old mind. And eventually, I came around to finally coming to grips with it, in the weeks to come. And it's during that time, it switched from Daredevil to Spider-Man. And then everywhere, every shop I went to, every chance I got, I bought more and more and more and more Spider-Man comics. And my dad's collection, I went back and started reading his comic book, his Spider-Man comics. I hadn't really even read them yet. And ever since then, Spider-Man has had a special place as being one of the main heroes in the MCU and in comics as a whole that I enjoyed the most. That waned for a while, going on into the 80s, as I got attracted to a lot of the independent comics and the new independent comic scene that had just come out, and a lot of the newer characters. I was on an Iron Man kick for a while and whatnot. But then when McFarlane burst onto the scene and just floored the entire comic industry, I don't think that we've seen a singular figure impact the industry in such a way before, as far as the firestorm along with it, the celebrity involved with it. We've not seen it before, and we've not seen it since. Really just those starting ASM 298, 299, and then the Landmark 300, which to this day remains one of the hottest back issue comics that of all of them. And it's just absolutely this force that, whether I may not always be my absolute favorite character at any given time, but for probably most of my adult life, Spider-Man's been my favorite character.
Awesome. All right, Bats. What about you?
Like Doug said, he was living with his grandparents. I also I lived with my grandparents and they're pretty much my babysitters when my mom and I found our own place. And so I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. And then when the 90s Spider-Man cartoon came out, I was, I knew of the character, I knew who he was, but I didn't know who he was. And so when the 90s cartoon kind of came out, it was also around the same time my grandfather died. And so I even spent more time with my grandmother. And so this character who was always trying to do right by his elderly mother figure and always trying to help her out and always kind of going out of his way to do something for her and kind of finding himself in all these situations and still having, the moral compass of doing the right thing, even though he could take the easy road. A lot of times he has to go through struggle. That really resonated with me as a boy, like around 10, 11 years old. And then as I started to collect comics, he was kind of one of the few characters outside of Spawn and Batman that I always kind of like looked to. And then as just the older I get, the more that character really started to resonate even more, and how important he is to, I would just say, young men in general, especially like the millennial age and like Generation Z, where a lot of kids aren't growing up with fathers and things like that. He's a very important character, and I think that it's good to have that type of character in fiction where, you know, not all of us are born into royalty and our parents are murdered in front of us, or, you know, we come from a dying planet, but just kind of doing the right thing because your parents raised you to do so is really important. Even if you don't have like a strong parental figure, Spider-Man is kind of a character that you can go look to and learn good values and stuff from. So that's just kind of my take on it. He's just super important, and I feel like we're kind of losing the mark on him as he's aging in the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
So I always encourage people to go back and read older Spider-Man stories as opposed to the new stuff.
Awesome. All right, Doc, you're the last guy. What are your thoughts on Spider-Man, his place in the industry, and his impact on you?
Well, I mean, his place in the industry is pretty clear. He is in, I mean, the real comics royalty trinity is Spider-Man, Superman, Batman. You know, and he, you know, as a figure, he is the most relatable everyman to ever be made in comics. And I think that is what drives his appeal. That is what has made him the most marketable. I mean, just on the financial side, you know, for merchandise and whatnot, why he is the most marketable character on the planet, next to maybe Mickey Mouse, you know. So I think for that reason alone, that's his place in the comic industry. He was, and always will be their flagship. You know, the Fantastic Four may be Marvel's first family, but Spider-Man is still their, you know, essentially their masthead. I on a personal level, I wish I had something as deep as everyone else had to say. My love of Spider-Man, I mean, yeah, granted, I've become more and more, I think I echo a lot of their sentiments, where, you know, the older I've gotten, the more meaningful the messages behind Spider-Man become, where he becomes more relatable, more, you know, he was an old soul, you know, that responsibility and really understanding that responsibility was something that I thought I grasped when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, you know, the older I get, the more responsibility, you know, you experience in your life, and it becomes, it's a great, you know, kind of role model. I wish I had something as profound as everyone else to say about what initially brought me to Spider-Man, except for he was really fucking cool. I mean, that was it. Like, you know, he was this kind of nerdy photographer shooting pictures for the Daily Bugle and doing anything else he could to make rent while banging a supermodel ginger. I mean, it's kind of awesome.
All right.
Yeah.
So he's less of a touchstone for you than X-Men, but you still respect the character and admire the message in the series.
Exactly.
So for me, it's a lot more simple. I started reading comics at a much later time than all of you, and every night, when I go to bed with my 4-year-old son and I put him down, we read a comic book. Actually, it's normally 2 comic books, and when I read him a Spider-Man, he gets extra excited, and then for the next 3 nights, he wants to read Spider-Man. I want to read Spider-Man, Daddy. I want to read Spider-Man. Like, we don't have Spider-Man this week, but my son has just immediately attached himself to the character. He thinks he looks great. He likes the character. He feels attached to him. So as a dad, reading it with him, I've become much more attached to him. So Spider-Man holds a very special place in my heart, but it's mostly because of the relationship I have with my son, that were experiencing Spider-Man together. So, mine's come a little bit later, but Spider-Man's, he's a great character. And like you guys all said, he's a great role model for young men and even girls to learn responsibility from. So with that, let's just talk about the origins of Spider-Man. He was basically the brainchild of Stan Lee, who was thinking of a character. I guess at first he didn't quite like him, but they decided to move forward with the character. And then Steve Ditko was working with him, and I guess he filled in a lot of the missing pieces for the character that made him as great as he is today. Doc, what are your thoughts on Steve Ditko and Stan Lee and the creation of Spider-Man?
I don't think that Spider-Man becomes Spider-Man without Ditko. Stan kind of had a general direction for the character and a general idea, but especially, I mean, Ditko, he's an objectivist. He's obviously this is more in Doug's wheelhouse than mine, but from the literature aspect of it. But Ditko was that kind of objectivist that really wanted to push Spider-Man with growth, constant growth, and improving himself, but while still being, having an obligation to the world and to his family, but still being kind of a dick, kind of selfish a little bit in some ways, in virtuous ways. And but
he was obnoxious, and sometimes, I mean, he would just he knew it wasn't whenever he fought somebody, he wasn't just fighting them. In a way, he was kind of like dissecting them, and kind of trying to show them where they messed up and where they were going wrong. So
yeah. And I think that had a lot of Ditko's influence to it. I mean, I think Spider-Man, without Ditko involved, Spider-Man becomes a little bit more like Superboy, where he's not really he's not a sidekick. He's a hero in his own right, but he doesn't really advance. He doesn't really mature and evolve without Ditko's influence. I think Stan would have kind of let him be more of a happy-go-lucky teenager with only some of that responsibility.
So you think he would have been a more stagnant character without personal character growth? He just kind of would have been the same character for 10 years.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, interesting. So Pele, you were talking a little bit about Spider-Man. What do you think about the Ditko Stan Lee's parts in creating Spider-Man and the initial launch of Spider-Man?
There was a lot of friction between them, exactly where the character would go, how the character would evolve. Whereas I think that Stan kind of saw the character as one way, that he would be kind of like a almost like a babe in the woods, kind of, not really as sure of himself, where Ditko's like, no, we need to have him come out. We need to have him, become more confident faster. And so, like, I think that a lot of people would understand, someone who's virtually an orphan from very early on, even though he had his Uncle Ben and Aunt May, that the loss of his parents impacted him greatly. And I guess that responsibility, then, even more than his Aunt May and Uncle Ben, that responsibility became apparent. He went from being an orphan with the death of his mother and father to being a child of society, I guess you could say, in a lot of respects, because that responsibility to society, that the overwhelming drive to protect people and to try to make a difference, became parental to him. and with that responsibility, he matured as a character, and he didn't always do exactly the right thing, and sometimes that responsibility got him in more trouble than he at the time felt was worth. Eventually that it led to him finding his way, and being the type of mature and more fostering type of character he became in the future. I mean, he mentored, God, how many superheroes and heroes in the Marvel Universe has Spider-Man been a mentor for? And his outlook on life influenced, I'd say, at least half of the Marvel Universe. So, it's a very complex, layered character that the MCU, not the MCU, but the Marvel Universe, part of one of the central, ethos of the Marvel Universe is around about that responsibility and work ethic that Spider-Man fostered. So very, very impactful, very important.
Awesome. So Bats, what are your thoughts on Steve Ditko and Stan Lee and the creation of Spider-Man?
Like everyone kind of said, I think Stan had a general idea, but I think Ditko is definitely the driving force of it. What
he
stands
created the
out to me
costume
the
too,
most,
right? Because one of the best things about Spider-Man is the costume.
Yeah, that's I was about to say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Really, I think drives the character and what makes, why little kids love Spider-Man, such as your 4-year-old. He doesn't have to worry about responsibility and great power, but what really catches his eye, I think, is the visual style of Spider-Man, his look.
Mm-hmm.
All his core villains like Green Goblin and Mysterio and Dr. Octopus, they all have a really cool look to them. The whole world of Spider-Man is visually awesome. From the kid going to science class to the newspaper to him fighting in the sky between buildings on ropes is just kind of a really cool visual all around for a superhero. And so I think that's kind of what resonates a lot is the visual style of Spider-Man is just and some artists be able to capture it and then some artists don't be able to capture it, where it's just like, if you can't draw buildings, you can't draw Spider-Man. If you're into like magic stuff, like magic style comics, you can't really draw Spider-Man. You need that urban city landscape kind of style, and you got to really know how to like bend the human figure without breaking it. That's why you won't see too many like 3D model artists working in Spider-Man, because you got to be able to bend them. And as for like the legacy of Stan and Steve, I think it's going to be always repeated, because as much as they do something with Spider-Man, they can only go so far without people going, that's not Spider-Man. And they're like, oh, let us fix it. And so fixing it is going back to what Stan and Steve did. Like with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the reason everyone said it was, this is the best version of Spider-Man, their argument was it wasn't a 30-year-old in the costume. It was a kid. And so having the kid grow up and learn is kind of what resonates with everyone, on top of just the fantastic visuals of just that simple red and blue costume. Like anytime the costume changes, Spider-Man's got a ton of iconic costumes, but it always reverts back to the amazing suit. Always.
All right.
Yeah,
so the legacy is
part of the influence John Romita had later on was incredible, because he had he understood the same way Ditko did that there was a dynamism about the way that Spider-Man is drawn, and he picked up the torch and just ran with it. Ramita did, and that's what made his name, was drawing Spider-Man, because he's the hardest. I think that I've talked to other comics artists. I've talked to comics artists along the way, and they say there's nothing harder to draw than a Spider-Man book, because it's you, the page, and trying to make a 2D medium exude that action and that dynamic expression, and it's very, very difficult. And but yeah, like you were saying, there's an energy to it that you just don't have in other characters and other books. So
all right, so Stacks, what are your thoughts on the legacy of Stan Lee and Steve Ditko in respects to Spider-Man?
I think Doc, his first comment really hit it on the head, that Stan Lee established a really good foundation, and Steve Ditko just took that to another level. I always love the story. I don't know if it's true or not. It's one of those internet stories about when I think it was Spider-Man 33, where he lifts all the machinery up and makes a decision that if this is my fate, then so be it, and lifts all the machinery off. That Stan Lee was actually cheering at that point when him and Ditko were working on it. So I think, like I said, what Doc said, with Stan Lee establishing the foundation, Ditko taking it to another level, and those two just working that hard on establishing a character that's carried us for so long. It's the more people stray away from that original foundation is when the character starts to slip. And when Peter Parker's not just, like you were saying earlier, some kid that happened to get bit by a spider, when they stray away from that, the story suffers because of it. So I think the simplicity of that when you can boil down a character to one comment, and that's really what he stands on, that's great writing. So
all right, so Doug, what are your thoughts on Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and the creation of Spider-Man and their influence on it?
I think sometimes this is hopefully not too far off track, but there's like comic book fans who understand the role that Ditko played, and then you have like maybe the MCU fans that don't even care about comics, but they know of Stan Lee. And I think sometimes I actually kind of just feel bad for Steve Ditko that he doesn't get the credit that he deserves from maybe just casual sort of Spider-Man fans who are just like, yeah, Stan Lee. And it's just like, I don't know. There are times I just feel like over the course of the next couple decades, eventually Steve Ditko, especially if comics, like the industry, continues its sort of trajectory, people are going to forget about Steve Ditko, and that kind of just makes me sad.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's almost like we were talking Batman last week. Like Bill Finger is like a big afterthought. People don't even, not that everyone knows who Kane is, but like people don't even almost recognize that he was a huge part of it. And yeah, Steve Ditko had so many of the great ideas, like the finishing touches on the character and the origin and everything that really brought Spider-Man to life and made him the iconic character that he is today. All right, so now that we talked a little bit about who Spider-Man is, what he means to all of us, his creation, the two creators who made him. Let's talk a little bit about, maybe some more favorite comic issues. Doc, what's your favorite issue of Spider-Man?
You know what? Actually, it was an obscure issue of Amazing Spider-Man. I think it was, hold on, I have it right here. I'm pulling it out. It's what was it? Issue oh Jesus, where in the hell is it? I know I have two copies of it. Issue 347. It was when Eric Larson was on it, David Michelin, was writing it. It was the one where it was right after Venom made his return after being gone for a little while. It was the first time somebody other than the McFarlane had done anything with Venom, and he had been gone for, I don't know, probably 15, 20 issues at that point. And, Larson and Michelin brought him back. And I don't know why, Spider-Man's getting his ass kicked by Venom. He's getting chased around, and he finds, I for some reason, I think they end up on like some deserted island or some shit. And Spider-Man finds a skeleton, puts his ripped up costume on it, and runs away. Like literally just like he realizes, I can't win. So if this guy thinks I'm dead, he'll just go away. And it wasn't like, it was one of those things where I don't know why I liked it. It was showing Peter being clever, showing him that, Venom was there to fight him to the death. And he wasn't, it was purely grudge. So it wasn't like, Spider-Man had to stop him from slaughtering other people or anything. Venom just wanted to kill him. So as long as he thought, and other people were being injured in the, other things were getting damaged, people were being injured in the process. So as long as Venom thought Spider-Man was dead, he'd just go away and fuck off.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that, okay, even if I have to quit to make that happen, that's fine. And I liked it. I don't know why. I mean,
you don't have to explain it. It's your favorite comic issue.
Yeah,
it's because of your favorite. All right. It looks like Bat just went and got his favorite comic book. What's your favorite issue of Spider-Man?
That's the funny thing, is I didn't know the issue numbers.
Oh, he's looking for it. Never mind. Pele, let's let him look up that number. What's your favorite issue of Spider-Man?
Oh Lord, I've got a trifecta that I probably would think are my three favorites. ASM 121, 122. I consider those to be like one big giant size issue, because just how they interconnect between the death of Gwen Stacy and the death of the Green Goblin. That kind of like is a microcosm of what Spider-Man is and why he is the way he is, and his motivations as well as his personality, and you can point to that particular moment, the death of Gwen Stacy, as an explanation as to why he behaves the way he does and what motivates him, and important factors like how his own notoriety influences the people around him, the innocent people around him, and how he could possibly get them hurt because he feels his obligation to be, society's hero on a very street level. ASM 300, because just the radical change in direction that Venom brought, and McFarlane was really hitting his stride with the artwork. It's at a time when the artwork and the story kind of gelled together. There's always been I've noticed that in Spider-Man, there's time when the artwork really excels, but the story is kind of blah, isn't really at its greatest. And then there's times that the story is incredible, but the art just kind of misses the mark a little bit. So I think that at that point, there was a lot of parody there that McFarlane brought to there. So there's a lot of parody between the artwork and the story. And Spectacular Spider-Man 310, Chip Zdarsky. Oh my gosh. If anybody is not, I think we've harped on this before, previous episodes, but Spectacular Spider-Man 310 is a juggernaut of creativity, and not in so much as this incredible dynamic story and all this, but just Spider-Man's heart. And it describes, again, back to 121 and 122, why he does what he does, why he is what he is, how being Spider-Man has influenced him as well as affected the world around him, and how we can be, although we don't have powers, that we have an obligation to each other in a way to be the best people that we can be, so that we can make society better through our deeds and our good deeds and our owned acts of heroism on a much more, mundane, though not less important, more mundane level. So yeah, those three, I don't think I could actually switch. I don't think I could actually choose between them, but yeah, and they all come back to who Spider-Man is, what his motivation is, and what influences him, and how that affects the Marvel universe.
Awesome.
So
also 310 Spectacular Spider-Man 310 is my favorite as well. It's the only great Spider-Man issue I've ever read, like as it was released. So it gets bumped up in my head at least. Eric Brain saying Amazing Spider-Man 33, 121, and 248 are his favorite. And Tevius Smolka is saying the marriage between Peter Parker and Mary Jane. Bats, are you ready now?
Yes, it's issues 141 to 151 with the giant size number 5 in it, which is the Clone Genesis storyline.
Oh man, best story arcs later. Come on.
Oh well then
it's fine. Go with it, bro. We'll get to it.
Well, everyone had multiple issues on what's their favorite, so mine is this entire arc.
I didn't. I picked one issue.
I picked one.
All right, well then my favorite issue is Amazing Fantasy 15, because you can tell in a, no pun intended, amazing, perfect story in 12 pages. With like, I think I counted it, it's like 86 panels
Nice.
at one time. Where you just, everything you need to know about someone and their motivations, their weaknesses, their strengths, everything can be told in just 12 pages. And, we can't get a regular comic book writer to even like tell a cohesive story in one issue nowadays, let alone half an issue. So yeah, if I have to pick one issue, then it's Amazing Fantasy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Some writers can't tell a story in 6 issues anymore. Yeah, Claremont and some of these greats can do it in half an issue or just one. All right,
I think a lot of it's where they're influenced just to write for the graphic novel now.
Yeah, it's all about trades. They want to make a movie out of their story arc.
Yeah.
Lame. All right, Doug, what's your favorite issue of Spider-Man?
In addition to the issues that have already been mentioned before, particularly ASM number 33, actually, I don't know if it's not really a whole issue. It's actually a story within a comic. I think it's ASM 248 with the kid who collects Spider-Man. And that's the story where he visits a child at a hospital, and the kid obviously loves Spider-Man and all this sort of stuff. And at the end, the kid wants him to reveal who he is, and he does. But then after he leaves the hospital, that it's revealed that the kid has leukemia, and he's basically going to die within a week or whatever. And it's, I don't know, it's just this like super touching story where it gets back to, again, like the humanity of Peter Parker doing the right thing. And I don't know, that's, to me, like, even years later, it still like gets me weirdly emotional just thinking about it. I think it was by Roger Stern.
Awesome. Yeah, that was the one that Breen mentioned earlier, and he said there was a reason he knew he liked you. So I guess you guys have similar tastes in Spider-Man. All right, Stacks, you're up now. What's your favorite Spider-Man issue?
Well, Eric's got great taste in comic books, but horrible taste in candy. So,
He does. Damn Milky.
hashtag gummy bears.
Love
So-
milk chocolate. Oh.
I agree. 33 is my favorite. Just I mentioned it earlier, and everybody else kind of hit on it. There's just so many good ones, but to hit on one that's a little bit different, and it's probably may get some size from everybody, but number 800 was really good. I thought because I was kind of in and out of comics for a while. And the build up to number 800 with the Red Goblin is kind of what really brought me back in to stay for a while this time. That storyline, and plus it was near the end of Dan Slott's run, which was the best part of Dan Slott's run, is him getting off of it. And so I'll throw 800
shots fired.
as one of my favorites. And that number 33 is just one of those most memorables for me.
All right, sounds like we got a lot of the big ones out of the way, but Doc had something off the beaten path a little bit. All right, so we got the best comic issues out. So now that we're on a high note, let's bring everybody down a little bit. Doug, what are your thoughts on One More Day?
Oh, jeez.
Oh.
Apparently, the goal of this segment is to get Doug Ernst to swear.
Yeah.
Why do you want to do that, man?
Yeah, you can go from the kid who collects comics to One More Day. That's quite a juxtaposition right there. Just to me, that was pretty much the straw that broke the camel's back. I drifted away from Spider-Man for a while after that one. I walked away. Well, basically, like Peter Parker walking away from Spider-Man. It's just a total, to me, betrayal of the character to have him essentially make a deal with the devil. And yeah, I'm trying not to swear. Basically, is what I'm saying the people behind that, the people that approve that, they lost the plot. They were just totally derailed, and I don't think it's actually, in many ways, I almost think there's like some sort of cosmic or metaphysical thing, because I don't know if he's really ever recovered for a lot of fans since that moment, because there's just something was broken to me within Spider-Man when that happened.
Trying to say he was Tom King.
That's a good way to put it as well.
Tom King before Tom King was cool.
Ugh. Tom King was cool.
I think Doug's right. That, I mean, it was Mary Jane had become this pillar in the story, and then they just yanked this pillar out and expected everything to stand. And they had been through everything. I mean, through losing a child together, the whole clone conspiracy fiasco. I mean, after going through all of that, and it's just like, yeah, the 70-year-old woman who we love, I get it, is dying, so let's break up our marriage in order to save her. And I know the tie in the bonus of, hey, yeah, you get your secret identity back, but it just seems so contrived, and it's like, who raise your hand if you would make this deal, and you got one dude in editorial saying, yeah, sounds great. Just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I kind of get the direction. I get the direction that they were trying to go with that, where he had to choose. He chose between what he wanted, his own happiness, his own joy, in exchange for his responsibility and all that. But the problem is no choice like that is ever a winner, because we have a very limited scope of what the impact of that choice will have. And it's always the thing, people have had that, it's the age old conundrum where, if you could go back in your life and change any one thing, what would it be? you know, but the problem is if you did go back and change it, you know, would it be something that would be beneficial in the long run? You know, if you like say, oh, if I knew that Bitcoin was going to hit 20,000, you know, at the end of 2017, you know, if I knew that way back in 2015 when it was $5 a coin, you know, would, you know, boy, I wish I could do that. Well, do you? Because you don't know what would happen. One, you don't know what that influx of money would do to your life, what it would change about you. Would it actually make you a better person? Two, the situation itself, you know, would radically change you because you've now you went back and made a choice and kind of had a do-over. You know, is that going to change you going forward, that you're always going to be looking back and thinking, you know, oh, well, what if I could have done this differently, or what if I could have done that differently, you know? And it's just never a good decision. You know, we live with the mistakes we've made, or we live with the choices that we've made, and that's what makes us who we are. You know, you find a way to deal with the adversity and those problems, and you go on. You know, life isn't about do-overs. So
And you don't make deals with the devil.
Yeah, and you absolutely do not make deals with the devil, because, you know, it makes you his accomplice.
You have this character, and everything about him hinges on great power comes great responsibility. You take responsibility for your actions.
Exactly.
And then he gets into a Faustian deal with a demon, and it's like he's also been around a long, like he's done the superhero thing long enough. He's dealt with the spiritual realm. He's literally faced off against demons. You know that entering into a Faustian deal is going to end badly, but he does it anyway, and you're just like, who came up with this? I went away from Spider-Man comics for a while, and I've said this before. I actually came back during Ends of the Earth with Dan Slott, and my brother was talking to me about Spider-Man, and I was like, ooh, maybe Peter is literally going to the ends of the earth to fix this wrong or whatever the heck. And then it's like, no, that was the storyline that ended up with him basically like the superior Spider-Man.
Yep.
And I was just like, I can't win. I don't even know. I was just like, as a Spider-Man fan, I don't know if I could do this. And that's when I actually started reviewing Spider-Man comics, because I was like, I want to just chronicle the downfall of like everything that's wrong with you know, this, because the media sites weren't doing it. So it's like somebody needs to like write about what is going on here. But yeah, the Faustian deal, I just
that's what happens when you have you know, moral relativism. You know, that's the problem. You know, when you have people that have, you know, their morality is based on relative issues rather than, you know, an objective truth, you know, and what you believe to be an objective good. That's what you end up with. And you end up with this cultural Marxist ideology that, you know, nothing is truly good, nothing is truly evil. So, you know, and that's a counterpoint to where we should be as a society, as to where people want us to go. And if you're wondering who wrote that, is J. Michael Straczynski. And you know, cultural Marxist. You know,
evidently he
so,
didn't come up with that idea, though. That was editorial.
Committee, right?
Yeah,
probably.
I think didn't they take his name off of that issue, or he didn't want anything to do with it, or I know he was fighting that particular editorial decision, but ultimately he still wrote it. He did, you know, he was I don't know. The whole thing is messed up, but yeah, Joe Quesada, yeah.
So, Matt, so you're talking about whenever the writers stray too far away from the original vision and intent of Spider-Man, people lose their mind and then they have to go back. Would you say that One More Day is the most extreme example of someone going and taking the character so far away from what he was, where, you know, that they almost broke him?
Yeah, because he hasn't been able to be fixed in 10 years. Uh, I could say from a personal level, when he revealed himself in Civil War, I thought it was the wrong choice for Marvel to do that. And so when they did One More Day, I kind of saw it as a fixing point, but then as it went on, you know, like kind of like when they do a big change in comics, it lasts for like 2 years, right? And so then like by the third year, I'm like, okay, they're gonna fix it now. Nope, they still haven't fixed it. All right, how about now? And they're like, wait, Doctor Octopus is what? Okay, Doc Ock is Spider-Man now. Okay, well, yeah, when he comes back as a ghost, comes back and he's not a ghost anymore. He's gonna come back. He's gonna get with Mary Jane. He's gonna fix his life. Nope. He's running. He's gamma male Tony Stark. Okay. It just kept going and going and going and going, where it's just like the guy who turned Captain America into a Nazi is now fixing Spider-Man, and that's just total malarkey.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
as much as I could say I've been enjoying Nick Spencer's Spider-Man, it's still, the stink is still there. You know, like, because MJ and Spidey were never married, so the stink is still there. Just because they're kissing each other in their underwear on the couch doesn't mean that, you know, the Spider-Man mythos doesn't have herpes. It still has herpes, and so
I think a lot of it has. I think a lot of it has been undone, but yeah, there's always that lingering kind of.
It's still there. Like the scar is still going to be there, and it'll always be there. And there's no way to actually like reboot it, like because Marvel isn't like DC where they could just reboot and be like, oh, new storyline, new this, you know, new universe. No, they always have that sliding timeline. So regardless of how many retcons you slide off of, it's still going to be there. And you know, in modern comics, they don't want married couples. They don't want strong male figures who lead a household and do the right thing. You know, we're seeing this in Bendis's Superman. We're seeing it across the board. You know, Batman can't get married because Batman needs to stay sad. Spider-Man can't have Mary Jane. They can't stay married to her. You know, Green Lantern can't have Ferris. Barry can't have Iris. No one can have a significant other in comics anymore. And it's just, and I think it kind of starts with One More Day. It's like, oh, if we can unmarry Spider-Man, no one needs to be married. And here we are, 2019, with the dying comic book industry, where we're talking about, oh, the best storylines are from the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the stink will always be there. You're not going to be able to wash that stain out. I don't know how many metaphors I got. I think I'm running out.
All right. Did Stacks weigh in on One More Day, or we?
Yeah, I kind of jumped on Doug's comment there. So,
all right. So it's interesting. You know, I'm never going to read that story because it sounds so awful. But you know, if you want people to engage you on like Twitter, say you like One More Day. See what happens. You will get drowned in people telling you what a god awful story it was and how much they hate it. And it's crazy that they refuse to like go back from it.
Yeah, let me know when it's my turn.
Oh, I'm sorry, Pele. Would you like to talk about One
More
Day?
No. Oh, I thought you were about to come to me.
I'm just came to you, buddy.
I went to the comic shop to pick up my comics that day. It was on a Friday. I didn't get to make it on Wednesday. I didn't own a shop yet. It was the same shop. I just hadn't bought in, you know, hadn't become partner in the shop yet. And I went to go pick up my books, and the shop owner, who is one of my best friends, looked at me square in the eye and said, don't buy Amazing Spider-Man. What do you mean don't buy Amazing? Don't buy it. He goes, skip whatever the series thing is going to be, because he'd already read, he's like, just don't do it. So those 3 or 4 issues, I've not read them. I know what happens in them. I know what occurs, but I had somebody else tell me don't. Someone I really trust say don't. It'll ruin Spider-Man for you, because some meathead has just went and just screwed Spider-Man right in the butt. And I'm like, okay, all right. Well, I'll just kind of pass on this story arc then, and never read it. Know what happens. The one benefit to all that we talked about, kind of touched on earlier, was Doc Ock, Dr. Octavius, the supposed superior Spider-Man. Now, I found it interesting later on, though. He's actually kind of almost a good guy now. He's still an asshole, of course, major one. He still is totally self-absorbed and everything, but I noticed one thing that did come along later on. He was talking about when he became Spider-Man, he took over Peter Parker's body and all that. He was in a fight with a villain, and he killed the villain. I forget which villain it was. He killed the villain, knocked his head clean off his shoulders. And he realized something. Spider-Man was always holding back. Whenever he was fighting a villain, Octavius thought that Spider-Man was weak, or weaker than he really was. He thought that Spider-Man was, not as strong as him. And he realized how much Spider-Man was holding back in all of his fights, because he didn't want to hurt people, because he didn't want to kill a villain. That he felt that responsibility not only to himself, but to people even the people that he fought against. And it took a learning curve then for Octavius to start pulling his blows. Otherwise, he would just end up killing all the villains and become a villain himself. So, again, become a villain himself again. So, it's interesting there. It's people. I think a lot of the other characters in the Marvel Universe underestimate Spider-Man, and it's probably a very good thing for him that he's underestimated, because if all of them knew just how strong and how capable Spider-Man really is when he's unfettered, then I think that the gloves would be off, and a lot of villains would be gunning for him a lot harder than they do.
Interesting. All right. So, Doc, I think you just came back to the discussion. What are your thoughts on One More Day?
I think there's a reason J. Michael Straczynski asked for his name to not be on it. He spent his, JMS kind of had spent his entire run trying to bring Peter and Mary Jane back together from being, estranged, I guess you could say. And he finally gets there, and then they have to bork it all up with Civil War. And again, like Civil War, they didn't even, there were so many things that were unnecessary in that whole section of the Spider-Man portion of that era, with the Civil War being about a superhero registration act, and there was no need for Spider-Man to ever unmask. That wasn't part of the registration. That never was. He just had to identify himself to the government, not to the entire world. And the fact that they made it, they conflated all these things, because they knew what their Quesada knew what his plan was, and it was to get to one more day. And he had to first unmask Spider-Man, and then he had to essentially put him on the run, and then he had to put him in an unwinnable position. And now they tried to find the best way out of that they could. And again, I mean, maybe I misread this, but Spider-Man never said yes to that deal. It was Mary Jane. Mary Jane's the one that agreed to the deal with Mephisto, not Peter. So they tried to kind of spare Peter, but the fact that the offer was presented to Peter and that his wife accepted it, he kind of gets the blame too. But technically he never accepted it, unless I've just totally misread that.
I thought there was a panel where he's like, "Yeah, do it," or something along those lines.
She agreed. She made the deal, and then talked to him, and he finally just gave in to her, not to Mephisto.
Okay.
You know, Mephisto proposed the deal to Peter. Mary Jane basically made some counter demands and accepted the deal, and then Mary Jane talked Peter into it, and she's
like Eve.
Yeah, she's Eve in this situation. Yeah, and the thing was, it was character assassination of both of them at the same time. And the fact that, you know, as I said, JMS spent the entire run trying to get them back together just to have Quesada rip it apart at the end. And
what an asshole.
Well, I think that explains a lot of the reasons why JMS left Marvel immediately, and has, other than like, I guess for Marvel 1000, has not agreed to come back since. Because I think he hates Quesada because of that. And but no, I mean, look, and the fact that, okay, even if you're not gonna ever undo one more day, just have Peter and Mary Jane back together at this point. I mean,
that would sell comics. They don't want to do that.
I know, right?
Yeah, you sell comics.
I mean, like, and the thing was, there was, I don't think Joe ever quite understood Peter. I mean, and maybe this is the fault of all of us. Maybe we're all falling for the same thing, that we all kind of love the Peter that we were first introduced to, and Joe's was teenage Peter that's unmarried and blah blah blah, and fell in love with Gwen Stacy. And a lot of the people that came in when Peter was with Gwen Stacy never accepted Mary Jane. And then all of us that kind of came in during whenever he was with Mary Jane, we don't accept one more day. So maybe we're all, falling for the same mistake of just always hating the thing that changes the Peter that we initially fell in love with. Maybe. I don't know.
I've always said there were ways they could have dissolved the marriage where I would roll my eyes, I would grit my teeth, but I'd be like, fine, whatever. Like, you could still undo this. But to me, it was just the fact that it was a devil deal with Peter mixed with Peter Parker. Like, that to me was just, like I said, such a betrayal of the character. And it was like a slap in the face. To this day, people are still this riled up about it. Like, I just think they thought, oh, they'll get over it. And it's like, no, this is a fundamentally a disgusting thing what you've done to this character. So I don't know.
I think you're right.
It's one of those things that transcends fandom. It doesn't matter what comics you like or what side you support. Everyone hates One More Day universally because it just resonates with everyone that it's just a terrible story arc and it never should have been.
Actually, I've met people who don't. They're like they're the Gwen Stacy shippers, the Peter Gwen shippers. They're never really liked Mary Jane to begin with. So yeah, I've met them. They're vile, disgusting people.
All right, so I think we've touched on the low point of Peter Parker history in One More Day enough. Let's talk about something a little bit more cool. Spider-Man has an amazing rogues gallery. He has all kinds of great villains. He has had them for a long time. They're still creating some new ones. I think, maybe Venom was the last truly great Spider-Man villain they've created. Stax, who is your favorite villain in the Spider-Man universe and why?
I'm glad I get to go first on this one because all the good ones don't get taken right off the bat. But I'm going to go with Big Brain himself, Norman Osborn, because all the way back to the beginning, he has manipulated Peter Parker, has been out for Spider-Man. Just the storylines that play out so well with him as the Green Goblin, the intricacies of working Norman Osborn in there, just everything with Norman Osborn over time has been really good. And when they brought him back, and for even the Clone Saga, where a lot of people kind of rolling their eyes at that point on the Clone Saga, but when you find out he's behind all of that and he's pulling the strings and manipulating everything, it's actually pretty cool when you think about it. But definitely Norman Osborn. I'll throw a second one out there for Carnage, just because of the insanity, the unpredictable nature of it, and how I always like it when when Spidey fights a villain and his spider senses aren't he's not able to use them, because it ups the intensity of the fight, and you really get that struggle from Spider-Man during those battles, and it's always, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? And he has to think more than just react. And I really like those fight scenes when that's involved. So,
all right. So we got the classic Norman Osborn. Bats, who's your favorite Spidey villain?
Can I say the spot?
You can say whoever you want to, brother.
Just kidding.
It's your world.
I think it's definitely Norman. He's just a perfect villain. he's a nice mix of the Joker with a nice mix of Lex Luthor, all combined in the best character at Marvel, and everything he does at every turn, he's just like, it's shocking every time. There's never been a moment where you're like, yeah, that was kind of dumb. Like, even when he gets the worst Spider-Man villain attached to him, when you combined Carnage and Green Goblin, it's still exciting and shocking. So,
all right. So Norman Osborn is he's like the Mr. McMahon of the Spider-Man universe.
He's part McMahon, yeah.
He's behind everything.
Yeah.
All right. So we got 2 votes for Norman Osborn. Were you saying something else, Bats?
I want to say Doc Ock, but Doc Ock is no longer a villain thanks to Dan Slott. He's a anti-hero who
hangs out with Hydra.
Once you become Spider-Man, are you even a bad guy? So
yeah, he definitely has some bad guy tendencies. He's working through it. All right. So next, Pele, who's your favorite Spider-Man villain?
Well, obviously Green Goblin's my favorite one, since my favorite books are where he's the main antagonist in it. But I'm going to say Doc Ock for this panel, because he's just so there's so many layers actually to that character. What he means to Peter Parker, that he was also a mentor that turned on him, kind of taught Peter some very valuable lessons. I know that Harry also, Norman's son, where there was that betrayal there, where they both felt betrayed. And he became when he took the mantle of the Green Goblin, that was also, very important, very pivotal time in Spider-Man's career. But Doc Ock, because he just always brought out the best in Peter as far as his ability, what he's needed to do, how he dealt with situations. It's very few villains that Spider-Man faces that are as intelligent as him. I don't think Norman was. I think Norman in his own way was very intelligent, but he didn't have that scientific mind behind it as much. His was more of a business mind. He was, although he did have science as a background, he didn't have I don't think he was quite as intellectually gifted as Peter Parker. But you have Octavius, who is, he's one of the smartest characters in the Marvel Universe. And the only real downside that he always had was his selfishness and his greed. And that was always what led to his downfall, was his own shortcomings, more than actually making mistakes in fighting or making mistakes in combat. Octavius. Yeah. And what's I just like that dynamic there between Spider-Man and Doc Ock, because they always seem to bring out the best in each other, or worst.
Okay, Dan Slott.
No, I mean, I just like Octavius. I liked Octavius back when he was just, when he was the Ditko character. I mean, I don't know. He's always one of my favorite villains.
If I could retract my statement, I want to say the Jackal now, because anyone who brings back your dead girlfriend to haunt you is a total piece of shit. And that's like high level. That's like almost higher than Norman.
That's major trouble.
Yeah.
But Norman ends up behind it all in the end. So
no, because Norman wins because he planned and brought back your dead ex-girlfriend, and then he fucked her and had her kid, and she had his kids.
It's pretty rough. Some Jerry Springer shit right there.
That's a mic drop for Norman Osborn.
When Norman Osborn, plans to bring back your dead girlfriend, even though it's the Jackal, maybe signing a deal with the devil is a good idea.
Yeah, how good of a woman is Mary Jane if she'll do something like that? Maybe he's better off without her.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's talking about Mary Jane and besmirching her name. Doug, who's the best villain in the Spider-Man universe, in your opinion?
Yeah, I'd pretty much have to agree with everyone. It's hard to deny that the Green Goblin is such an important figure in terms of being a foil to Spider-Man, and then you could get into like archetypes and all that sort of stuff. And then there's also, just in terms of potential and who as a kid I just thought was like really cool. I always thought Chameleon had so much potential and was really cool. I liked him, and I liked Mysterio. But yeah, in terms of just, if you have to have one foil to Peter Parker, to me, I just think Green Goblin you can't do without Green Goblin.
All right, so my personal favorite's Craven, but we do have another one. We got Richard Adams in the chat saying the greatest Spider-Man villain is Joe Quesada. And its sidekick Dan Slott. So
yeah, I was say Dan Slott.
I think Rich wins the day. He's got the right answer. But I personally like Craven, but I think we're going to talk a little bit more about him during our favorite story arc segment. So now that we've moved on from the best villains, let's talk about some 90s Spider-Man. Probably the pinnacle of the character. You had 3 ongoing series. They're all amazing. You have Amazing Spider-Man, Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man, and Todd McFarlane's amazing adjectiveless Spider-Man. All right, who are we going to? Doc, what are your thoughts about 90s Spider-Man? Was it as good as everyone says it is?
From 1990 until like 1994, it was. And then you got into the Clone Saga.
Hey, buddy, that's coming up next.
But and it's not that the Clone Saga was bad. It's just the fact that it never ended. It just kept going. Well, they didn't really have a way out of it when they started, and they just thought, okay, this will be cool.
Hey, we're going to talk about Clone Saga in depth here in about 20 minutes.
So yeah, I mean, I think for those first 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, it was excellent. But the only problem, and this is related to the Clone Saga, but not about the Clone Saga, is that it became the problem with the Spider-Man book at that point became that you had to kind of read all of them during the Clone Saga, and that is a bit of a problem. That does take it down a notch when it comes to overall quality, because I mean, you're basically dealing with a weekly title at that point, because a plot point from from Web of Spider-Man is going to get picked up in Amazing Spider-Man, 3 months later in this kind of mega story that they're doing. And so if you don't read everything, you're like, wait, where in the hell did that come from? They weren't like when they were kind of separated, like when the books are a little separated, they were better. But once they became kind of almost a weekly title, I think it did hurt the overall story. But after that, the title improved again. But it did slim down really, really far, because I think shortly after that they canceled Spectacular and Web. I think
there were 4 titles. There were 4 titles running. Because
there were 4. There were Spectacular, Web of Spectacular Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, Spider-Man, and Amazing Spider-Man, all going at once. And
I thought Spectacular replaced Web of Spider-Man, but 4 still is amazing. It's still the pinnacle of Spider-Man comics, correct?
Yeah. And the fact that the character could carry 4 titles at that point, I think honestly that making all of them into kind of a sort of weekly title is what did cause the need to contract the line and cancel, I think, Spectacular and Web, because
it was oversaturation.
And it wasn't. And if they kept them separate, I don't think it would have been a problem. I think he's a character that still could have carried 4 titles, but when they kind of interconnected all of them, it became a little bit of a problem.
All right, so Stax, what's your thought about that 90 to 94 period? Is that the best Spider-Man ever was? I think Stax might be gone. All right, let's send it over to Paley. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was that time, and the McFarlane 300, which I guess is about the same time, really. I think so. I think it was there for that like a year. There was like a year of time there where everybody it wasn't really the world as a whole, outside of comics, but within the comics community, that was the year of Spider-Man, and everybody, became either Spider-Man fans or Spider-Man haters, and because they were the fans loved it, they wanted nothing but Spider-Man, and they wanted to constantly be, bombarded with anything Spider-Man. And then you had the other people who are like, God, I've had enough. I've had enough of looking at this guy. Can we have something else? And slowly I could tell when I go in the comic shop, slowly that eroded over a period of time, where the people who love Spider-Man and then the few who hated him, more people from the love camp kind of moved over into the hating him or just getting tired of him camp. So you saw the numbers change over a period of time until finally it was like, you had not enough people on the I love Spider-Man side to really support 4 titles anymore. So, they had to cut back. And I don't think they cut the right books personally. So, but that's just my opinion. I think that that they should have only cut 1 title instead of cutting 2 titles, and they never should have cut Spectacular Spider-Man. Webb was always kind of like the bastard child of the series. It was good. It always kind of dealt with the overall peripheral of Spider-Man's impact on the world, and other characters associated. It's kind of like almost like a team up kind of book. You always had like the introduction of Cloak and Dagger. You had introductions of other characters, so it almost was like a secondary Marvel team up. But I don't think they ever should have dropped Spectacular Spider-Man. They should have had 3 issues. 1 issue per week. They should start off the month with Spectacular, then go into Adjectiveless, then have a break, and then have ASM on the final week. The month. And but they did what they did. Marvel did what they did, and we ended up with no Spider-Man at all really for a while, except for ASM. It was kind of like a dark time. That led into a dark time.
All right.
For Spidey fans.
So I want to welcome Yellow Flash to the chat. He's commenting in there. Really appreciate him showing up. Doug, what are your thoughts about that 90 to 94 period? Was that the pinnacle of Spider-Man? What did you think about having all those titles?
Yeah, that was a great period for me. I thought it was outstanding. And then it sort of, with the Clone Saga, when that started ramping up, I actually disappeared, and I was just so upset at the time that I basically, for like 2 years, I didn't really collect Spidey comics. That's where maybe I would, like, every 3 or 4 months, I might pick up an issue just to see if they were fixing things or whatever. But I forgot who said it, but it just kept going on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is out of control. And so, but yeah, that 90 to 94 run, I was buying a lot of Spider-Man comics.
All right, Bats, what was your thoughts on that run? Was that a good time for you as well?
I didn't read it, so I have no thoughts.
All right, Bats wasn't in the plan. Wasn't in for it. Stacks, are you back? All right, he's still out. All right, we've been beating around the bush. Let's talk about Clone Saga. It's an interesting story where they started going down a path and kept writing and writing, but they had no end for the story in mind, and they didn't know how to end it, so they just kept prolonging it, from what I can understand. And then finally they got into a committee and decided, I believe Ben Reilly is Spider-Man, or was Spider-Man the whole time. Doc, or let's not go to Doc first this time. Doug, what were your thoughts on the Clone Saga and the way that it just drug on and it sounded like you kind of dipped out. Did you? What did you think about the way they ended it and the way it was kind of like by committee?
So yeah, I basically skipped out, and I know obviously this was all fixed or whatever, but when the idea that the Peter that you've been reading about your entire life wasn't actually Peter Parker, like, it's one of those things in creative writing where it's like, and then I woke up and it was all a dream or whatever, and you're just like, that's another one of those things where it's
like a cop out.
You're breaking trust with the reader, and it's just like a cheap way. I don't know. It just felt like super high schoolish to me to do that. And so at that particular time, I was just so sort of annoyed, and even like the art, the quality of the comics or something, it just wasn't right at the time to me. It just seemed like it was not right. I guess that's the best way to put it. And I was just like, okay, I'm out of here. And like I said, I would dip in and out to the comic shop every couple months after that, and then I started up again once I got into the military, and I was overseas. Then I actually picked up my comics again and was having them sent to Germany or whatever. But there was a couple years there, I want to say, what is it, like 95, 96, where I wasn't buying Spider-Man.
So would you describe something like that as like fanfic, where it doesn't really fit in, like someone decided they had an idea, but it doesn't really stay true to the character?
Right. It was just, I don't know. It's one of these things where you're just like, I thought these were supposed to be professionals in charge of this. And this is like I said, a high school creative writing class was trying to come up with ways out of creative boxes that they put themselves, or corners that they put themselves into. And so I don't know if it was, like you said, decisions by committee sometimes end up being really, really bad. That's what it just felt like. Nobody was at the wheel of the car, and it was just sort of somebody take control, and they didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. All right, Bats, did you have any thoughts on Clone Saga?
I flipped through the Epic collections, and I was like, man, this art looks badass. I'm probably going to pick this up. I don't know how many of those collections are. Evidently, there's an infinite amount because apparently it never ended. So I'll have a lifetime of Spider-Man that isn't Dan Slott.
Let's catch up on.
Yeah.
All right, I think Stax is back. Stax, what's your thoughts on the Clone Saga?
It just went on. It's not that it didn't have some really good parts in it. It just went on way too long. It was drawn out for what seems like ever, and you just lose people when you don't finally get to the point on something. So like Bats was saying, yeah, you got a ton of material there to go through, but unfortunately, not a lot of it really matters in the story. The character of Kane was interesting, being another, or the first failed clone. And I think, everybody's doing the guessing on the current Spider-Man run, who the new villain is. And I think it may be reaching back to the Clone Saga. But I'm, the very early 90s stuff that you guys were talking about, that was, with McFarlane and everything, that was really where I was at. And I kind of, as we got into the Clone Saga, kind of like Doug was saying, I fell off. And I didn't really follow Ben Reilly hardly at all. So it made it, and that made it really difficult. I was like 11, 12 at the time. So it made it, and there wasn't a comic shop close to where I could go and get the book. So it made it really difficult to stay caught up on a series like that when there were so many touch points and so many different books.
All right, so Yellow Flash is saying for him, he loves Ben Reilly. Scarlet Spider was really cool, and he came on the book at that time, and for him, Ben Reilly is Spider-Man. So, different perspective on the book, considering he came in at that time as Ben Reilly being Spider-Man. And he also believes the new villain is going to be a clone. Doc, what are your thoughts on Clone Saga and what happened there?
Well, I mean, I kind of started it earlier. It was an interesting idea to just kind of like, reach back to kind of an unresolved plot point from, a very early issue of Spider-Man, and then they wrote themselves into a corner that they couldn't figure their way out of. And nobody realized it. Like the law of unintended consequences kind of kicked in and kind of started punching everybody in the face. And everybody realized, oh shit, we don't know how to get out of this. And as Doug mentioned, it's like they had to come together as a as a committee to do it, and writing by committee almost never works. You'll get an answer, it just won't be a good one, or one that anybody actually likes. It'll fix the problem, but it won't be a solution anybody likes. And they kept going, and I think they saw that like there was interest in it, and it was kind of the beginning of the Marvel that we know today, where if somebody likes something, like if the fans like it, we're gonna do more of it.
Like the Old Man Logan stuff.
Yeah. Like Old Man Logan was popular, so let's do Old Man fucking everybody.
Yeah.
And so they did that. They fell into that trap of, ooh, people like this, let's do more of it. And while that's an okay trap to initially fall into it, you just have to learn where the line is. And entertainment media has never learned where the line is on that, because they always think that they can push just a little bit more to get a couple more dollars out of an idea, and they inevitably go too far. And that's what they did with the Clone Saga. And by the time they realized how far that they had gone, they started losing readers, and they started losing, they lost their way out too, because they didn't know what the hell to do. I mean, you had 2 books that were Ben and 2 books that were Peter, and there was this kind of, there'd be a Jackal here and a Dr. Warren there and a Gwen here, and nobody knew, and you couldn't even tell, but because they were all clones, you couldn't tell if it was the same one from the other book the week before.
Yep.
Nobody knew what the hell was going on.
Including the writers.
You know what it sounds like? When they started writing Lost, at the end of the first season, they didn't have an end game in mind. They didn't actually know what the island was. But it was so popular that it got picked up immediately for like 3 seasons, and they just kept writing horse shit. And like 4 years later, they're like, well, we need to end it. They're like, well, we don't even know what it is. We've just been making stuff up for 4 years.
Yeah.
Well, it's got to make sense. Like, well, nothing makes sense at this point. No one knows why the polar bears were there. Wait for 5 years for that answer. So it sounds like they did the same thing with the Clone Saga.
It kind of was.
Mm-hmm. Where they're just making up stuff for.
Yeah. So that's the problem. I mean, the idea behind the Clone Saga initially was good. And then and this is the other problem with the Clone Saga, where they've just decided, and it became kind of a rule after the fact. It's become like the default explanation for everything, which is when they can't figure out a way out of anything, it was Norman. That's become the go-to solution for everything Spider-Man when they write themselves into a corner ever since the Clone Saga was blame Norman. That's it. That's what we get now.
All right. So Pele, do you want to put a bow on the Clone Saga before we move on to the next segment? What are your thoughts on that?
I always find it interesting that I buy a lot of comic collections, a lot of them, probably, I would say 2 to 3 decent sized Spider-Man collections a month. And what's always funny is there's a gap in those Spider-Man collections. And it comes right at the Clone Saga.
About midway through.
Yeah, exactly about midway through, right after the revelation of right after, because I always find like Web of Spider-Man 118 and 119 and 120, no, sometimes then 2121, then 122, and then it's like, and then the series is over. And it's like there's a gap. There's always a gap there, and it's like, well, you didn't finish the series here. He's like, that's when it ran. That's when I ran out of gas, and I didn't want to read any more of it. So that tells you everything right there. When people go to sell their comic books, which okay, fine. I hate to see people part with their comic books, but I love to buy them. But there's always that gap in Spider-Man. And what's funny is you would think that would make those other issues more valuable since so many people weren't buying it. But no, they're hard to sell even at cover price today. So, they're not getting any more valuable. There's no real demand out there for them. They just suck. So it's like
Iceman.
Yeah, it's horrible. People just don't want to buy it, and they don't even want to think about that it even happened. But one of the problems I identified too was the artwork involved here. The artwork in the series. Some people like Stephen Butler, other people don't. But I think that Butler and Emberlin was kind of like this toxic marriage of where Spider-Man started looking like He-Man, from the Masters of the Universe. He started, he didn't look like the svelte, defined defined musculature, but he wasn't, like ripped out. And that's when you started getting ripped out Spider-Man at the same time too. It's kind of like a Liefeld character at that point.
Hey, Spider-Man's got to go get his pump on.
Oh my God. There's some issues there where it's like, he's bulging out like a cover of Brigade or something like that, or, it looks like the issue of Web of Spider-Man looks like Cable, looks like Liefeld's Cable. And it's like, no, this is not what Spider-Man is supposed to look like. What are you people doing? So not only was the story unappealing, but you had these visually unappealing versions of Spider-Man. It's like, oh God, it's that point in which that Marvel's lost its way, and nobody had bought it anymore. So I'd like to say that I want more of them in the shop, but I don't. Nobody wants them. Nobody wants to sell them because they don't have them. So it's kind of like a lost era there. I think of the last part of the Clone Saga. There is just, it's a lost era of Spider-Man where there were no real Spider-Man books for several, for a few years, or at least 2 years. So it is a dark time, very dark time. Probably in my opinion, the darkest time for Amazing Spider-Man.
All right, so I want to say a shout out to Captain Frugal. He's in the chats. Thank you very much for joining us. Having a great conversation about Spider-Man right now. So there's one last thing I want to cover about that 90s era that I think has ramifications today, and it's Adjectiveless Spider-Man #1. Had 3 or 4 variant covers. It kind of started that variant cover, gold foil, all these kind of cool things. Pele, what are your thoughts on the impact and legacy that issue has had on the industry?
Oh boy. Well, it was one of the first issues that Marvel printed into oblivion. You had literally, I think the total was about 9.5 million copies if you added all the direct variant, the color variant, the silver variant, the gold second print, which I think had around 500,000 copies by itself. You had the polybag silver. You had the one that everybody wanted, but you couldn't seem to find, which was the platinum edition, which was actually scarce. It's the only one that was truly scarce of all of them. And it's to this day, actually, the only one that's really worth a decent amount of money. But and it started the trend. It started the trend of, because you had real completionists at the time. Everybody wanted all the all of the Spider-Man #1s, and people genuinely went out and they found them because they were every freaking where. You couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting an issue of Spider-Man #1 in any comic shop at the time. There were like 50 on the shelf. There was a gold behind the counter. And if you were lucky, you could find the retailer's platinum edition, framed over in the corner with a price tag on it, like $400. So, but and now coming forward, that's what they do with every issue. That's what Marvel aims for. Every single freaking issue is we want to recapture Spider-Man #1. We want to recapture X-Men #1, which was just as bad, you know, and, you know, I can't pile it all on Spider-Man. That X-Men, you know, I've still got 400 copies in the back of the store, you know.
That's the Jim Lee X-Men #1.
Oh my, yeah, the one that had the wraparound cover that of all the covers connected, and yeah, I've still got like a whole long box full of those in the back.
When 5 covers was a lot.
Yeah, that was when 5 covers was a lot, not 50, just 5. But yeah, it was crazy. It was intense. People were buying because they thought that they were putting away for their kids' educations. You know, this Spider-Man #1, this is going to pay for my kids' college. They honestly believe this.
Yeah, they printed over 1 million of those, right?
That's what I was saying, 9.5 million.
Okay. I didn't think it was that high.
All of them together.
Like 2 million.
All the print runs of #1 combined was almost 10 million copies. So yeah,
I probably got 15 of them in my collection.
You know, and I've probably got, you know, at least
400?
2 of each. You know, at least 2 of each in my personal collection. And the Platinum Edition is one of those comics that I'm obsessive about, and if I see it for sale somewhere, I try to buy it. You know, I'll at least, you know, haggle with the guy and try to buy it. And I've accumulated 32 copies of it. Yeah, I've got 32 copies of Platinum #1.
Dirty comic hoarder.
That's right. I hoard because it was the only one that was really limited. And you only got 1 per store, or 2 if you were like one of the bigwig stores. You know, there was some kind of metric involved there, and they only printed 10,000 copies of it. And so it's the only one that's really limited. But going forward to today, everything is like that. And we're back in the same damn boat where people are thinking, oh, this 1 in 5,000, you know, remastered variant is going to be worth $50,000 someday. No, it's not.
No, it's going to sit on your goddamn shelf.
Yeah, if you're lucky, you'll be able to get 1/10 of what you paid for it in 5 years. Congratulations. You know, this is not a rare commodity. You know, this is just, you know, it's paper, it's ink, and
manufactured.
Yeah, this is not a handmade good here. You know, this is a mass-produced thing. It just looks a little different from the one that costs $4.95. Congratulations.
So Doug, do you have any thoughts on Spider-Man 1 and its, you know, its legacy on how Marvel does its marketing today? It really does seem to be the genesis of what we see today in the way that Marvel's predatory practices.
Yeah, at the time, if you actually had people with some sort of self-discipline and they used variants, in my mind, properly, I don't have any sort of deal with them, but what it's become today is just out of control and ridiculous and embarrassing to me. And they've used it over the years to hide the decline in sales, and everything's fine, and I just remember on the old Marvel boards years ago, they would say that and be like, well, no, you did like 10 variant covers, that's boosting sales. And so to me, it's just like everybody said, none of these books are going to be worth anything. That it's manufactured scarcity about a product that nobody cares about, so it doesn't matter. At least the old 90s books, people still care about those. Same thing when I go to a comic shop, if I see some of those old books and there's a good price on them, I'll snatch them up, even if I have 5 copies already. But I'm not going to do that to America Chavez variant number 20. Like, it's just, it's not going to happen.
So you don't want one of the Tony Stark Iron Man that has every variant of his suit on the cover?
Right, exactly. I just do not care about 25 variant covers.
What about 50-ish variant covers of U.S. Avengers for every state?
Nice. That's what I want. Where's my South Dakota variant?
I want an Alabama one.
Return of Wolverine that has the only difference is the different costume that Wolverine has on. Yeah.
My favorite one is
it's,
the one
10
with the
different
jeans and
ones.
the jacket and a
Yeah,
hat.
that was not bad.
So, does anyone else want to talk about Spider-Man 1 and its impact on today's marketing schemes, or we want to move on?
I just want to
think you.
go ahead, Bats.
I was gonna. The fact that it was the marketing scheme was they had Todd McFarlane, and now they're like
The
Jonathan
hot
Hickman.
comics.
Yeah, Jonathan Hickman. And I was like, yeah, no one cares. Bendis coming, yeah, no one cares. Like, it's not there. There's no hot comic book artist in 2019. There's nobody. There's that people are like, oh, this guy's on it. I gotta get it.
No, I disagree there. Donny Cates. Donny Cates could put his poop.
I'm saying
he could smear his poop on a cover.
Artist.
I'm saying a comic book artist. There's no.
Oh, I thought
artist.
you meant nobody in general. Okay.
No. Comic book artist. There's no one there's just no artist today that's just everyone thinks is the bee's knees.
I don't know if when Jim Lee does a run of interiors, it will still sell stupid numbers. He proved it on Batman. He proved it on. Although, you know what? Actually, no, I'm wrong. I'm wrong because whatever the hell the Terrifics or whatever the hell it was.
Yeah.
Immortal Man.
Immortal Man. Yeah.
That
Dick.
Yeah, that was a giant flop. Never mind.
Immortal Hulk's
Immortal
Hulk's interior artist is probably the hottest one right now. What's his name?
Joe Bennett.
Joe Bennett. He's probably the hottest as far as interior artort.
But you just
kind of the fact that you don't know his name proves my point that there's no hot artist.
You kind of
normally I do. I'm old and I have multiple sclerosis. I normally do remember it. I just have MS, so I don't remember everything.
Likely excuse.
Well,
thanks,
Joe Bennett is not on Immortal Hulk and the art sucks, so it speaks out everything I need to know about the man. All right, so Stax, did you want to say something? One more thing before we head off to the next subject?
I just wanted to say mine's still in the bag, and the bag says collectible for my Spider-Man #1. So it's.
I got one of them. I pulled mine out just now, and I got 3 copies of the gold, one of which is slabbed, 2 copies of the silver, one of which is slabbed, and 5 copies of the green, and none of them are slabbed.
And someday you'll be able to pay for your hamster's education with it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can send my next dog to, I don't know,
obedience school.
All right, so tomorrow, if you don't know, I am going to be doing a special live stream talking about the industry and the health of the industry. We're going to have Paley on there. We're going to have Retailer Comic Perch, and then we're also going to have Brett R. Smith's going to join us, and we're going to talk about some stuff. So we are going to go into the variant cover stuff a little bit more tomorrow, but I think it's time to move on. What's the next topic? Oh, yes, the best topic. Doug, what is your favorite all-time Spider-Man story art?
Oh, wow. Well, I think maybe my youth has probably shaded my opinion of this, but I really like the origins of the Hobgoblin and that sort of 80s mystery surrounding who Hobgoblin was and the art at that particular time and just everything about that 80s run of the Amazing Spider-Man. Just I still love it to this day, and they got the covers on. I think I've shown it before. Amazing Spider-Man #251, where Spidey's coming out of the bay and he's got the mask, and I don't know, just everything about that particular run. When I was a kid, I just loved it.
All right, so that's your #1 in your heart.
Yeah, like I said, I think my youth is probably shading my opinion of that, but I don't know. I want to say, what is that, like 1983 to like 85 or 86, or I don't even know what the years were, but that's
So it's like
where
a
I
24
remember.
issue arc.
What's that?
So it's like a 24, 30 issue arc.
It
It's about
went
the
over a
turn.
few years trying to figure out who exactly was the Hobgoblin.
Nice. I like that. I like the longer storytelling. That's why I like Robert Venditti. He'll tell a bunch of individual stories, but like 50 issues will be one big story. I like that. I like where it builds over time. All right, who's next? Pele. They were picking on you earlier. What's your
Yeah, the
favorite
bastards.
Spider-Man story arc?
Well, I guess the easy selection is ASM 299 to 317. That's kind of like,
The
culminating, and yeah, that's so well written, and the art is just beautiful eye candy. It's so gorgeous. But I'm gonna go back. ASM 50, introduction of the Kingpin. I love those ASM 50s. That whole 50 block from number 50 to like number 58 ish. Love that story with the Kingpin is really fantastic, and it's really it kind of gels the character of who the Kingpin is, what his motivations are, how he's kind of the antithesis to Spider-Man in so many ways. He uses his great power to get whatever the hell he wants instead of, being responsible with it. With great power comes, great influence with him instead of great responsibility. So yeah, it was probably if I had to really go back, it'd be the ASM 50 to 60, somewhere around in there. Is my favorite arc in ASM. But yeah, the 300s, the early 300s also.
Awesome. All right, Stacks. Hopefully no one stole your story. What's your favorite Spider-Man story?
Real quick, because I just had something pop up. I mentioned 31 through 33 earlier. It's one of those short story arcs that I really, really like. And I know it's not a popular one, but that the Red Goblin one, just reading that 800 book, really just because we hadn't had a good Spider-Man story in so long, that one just hit me in the feels a couple times with the death of Flash Thompson and some of the other things that happened in that arc. It was, I don't know, I liked it, and it's hard to say that Dan Slott's one of my favorite runs, but I actually really liked that story. I felt like it really delivered. So
awesome. All right, Bats, I'm gonna send it to you after Doc, because I already know what you're gonna say. Doc, what's your favorite Spider-Man story?
You know what? I think I'm actually going to go with Return of the Sinister Six. During the David Michelin, Eric Larson run. I don't know why. Actually, you know what? I do know why. That was... Now, I had started reading Spider-Man already at that point. But that was right around... I ended up in the hospital at that time because I literally broke my head.
Nice.
And yeah, it was... probably explains a few things.
So that explains it. That's what happened. Okay.
Yeah, I actually broke my head, and so but I remember my mom buying them for me from the gift shop because I didn't want to miss Spider-Man while I was in the hospital, and yeah, so I did. I mean that ended up really being a favorite story of mine. I mean, it wasn't especially amazing, but it ended up as my favorite as a result.
Awesome. Yeah, as long as it has personal meaning to you. I have a lot of comics that people probably don't even know exist. I'm like, I love that because I read it at an important moment in my life. All right, Bats. Get out with it. What's your favorite story?
Clone Genesis. I blew my load an hour ago.
That's what she said.
Yes, she keeps getting. I also also read this, as like Doug said, his youth is probably, blocking his judgment. But I read this is kind of like my first real Spider-Man story arc. I had read, an issue here, an issue there, but never a full story. And I got really into Ultimate Spider-Man in high school, and then near the end of high school, a buddy of mine, this actual book, loaned this to me, and then through circumstance of moving, I accidentally stole this.
Mm-hmm.
So
On purpose.
and so I know, and so this book just in itself is kind of the catalyst into like me really becoming a diehard Spider-Man fan. I like Ultimate Spider-Man a lot, but this is where like it just like this is the foundation of Spider-Man for me. And it has all the, has the Jackal. I'm a big fan of the Jackal. Has the, the responsibility and the consequences of his action with Gwen, him having a new girlfriend, a dead girl kissing him. That's always weird. And yeah, I think this also leads. This is like right after Harry was a drug addict and stuff. So there's all these like stories that all connected to the Spider-Man. This is also like they credited Ross Andrew, who's the artist in here in Far Away from Spider-Man, because this is the story where he goes to Europe. And so this being one of my favorite Spider-Man stories, and then seeing Far Away from Spider-Man, I was just like, why is Ross Andrews' name even on here?
He inspired the movie.
Then I would like to see Spider-Man dune buggy go up a wall.
Hey, don't ever talk shit on the Spider-Mobile.
No, I love it. I almost popped a pop figure, but then didn't, because I think having more than 2 pops is too many.
Mm-hmm. All right, so mine, I'll go real quick, is Craven's Last Hunt. It's not. I can consider it more of a Craven story, but than a Spider-Man. But I really like the black suit. I think it's a good story. He's, he's desperate to get back to his wife, I believe, at the time.
Oh.
It's an excellent story. J.M. DeMatteis, I believe, and the art's really good. I really like that one. And of course, it just inspired one of the best new recent stories in Nick Spencer's Hunted. So I like that one a lot. All right, so.
My wife wants to interject the issue 500 to 508, which is kind of like a rebuilding of Spider-Man and Mary Jane's relationship kind of era. So she's like, oh, that one.
Okay, so that's your favorite series. That's your favorite story now, Pele?
No, that's
what
Danielle was. No, that's what Danielle was yelling at me over here. She's like, oh, that one.
Okay,
so that's her favorite because of the
relationship-based story.
Yeah, she liked that. She liked that a lot.
All right, so we're going to talk about one more subject before we wrap this up. It's something near and dear to Doug Ernst's heart. It's why I brought him on the channel, because I wanted to talk about this. Doug, what are your thoughts on Dan Slott's Spider-Man run?
Oh, jeez. I don't want to
You're just trying to make Doug swear.
I don't want to keep people for another 2 hours here. So, long story short, not a fan. It's one of these things where I just feel as though over the course of time he was turned into an emasculated man boy. And how do I say this? There's so many places to go with this in terms of making Peter Parker disappear in his own book, having the supporting characters actually be more important than Peter. You have the Anna Maria Marconi sort of stuff where it's like he was trying to elevate her, basically trying to like elevate his own creations. Like I said, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I'll let it. I actually kind of want to hear what other people have to say, but my feelings on Dan Slott's run are definitely known. Not a fan at all.
Mm-hmm. I can attest to that. I do write as I spin an article or two for Bleeding Fool, and a lot of times I will go to Doug's blog for references to the things that I'm citing because I know Doug has talked about a lot of it. So I scroll through a lot, and I mean a lot of Dan Slott Spider-Man articles. He was on top.
He's a good idea man, but he's another one of these guys where I think he often bites off more than he could chew, writes himself into a corner, and then he will make characters behave in ways that are inconsistent. Like their IQ has to drop 20 points in order to make the story move forward or whatever. And it's like the execution, particularly at the closing, it all falls apart for him oftentimes.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Bats, what was your thought on Slott's Spider-Man run?
I would just say, out of a 10-year run, if you took this piece and that piece and this piece, you can probably add up 2 good years of Spider-Man in there. But I think that the high point is, when I want to read a Spider. The high point of wanting to read a Spider-Man story, nothing says Spider-Man like a supervillain wanting to have sex with the midget. That's like premium comics right there.
It's pretty legit.
Yeah, no, just all joking aside, yeah, about 2 years worth of good Spidey in a 10-year run.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right, so Pele, you got something to say about this, don't you? What are your thoughts on Slott Spider-Man?
Yeah, it's I would say it sucks, but it's kind of like it's too mediocre to really suck. So it's there's some things that you can almost appreciate because they're so bad, but he's just the Bendis of Marvel. It's so painful, just kind of like things drag on, and it's kind of limp-wristed, weak storytelling combined with really forgettable dialogue. That's just like I think that 2 years out of 10 is probably generous. I think that maybe he has one whiz bang issue a year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh, that's really great. Well, I guess next year he'll have another great issue.
I like Spider Island.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, that wasn't too bad. But
all right, looks like Stacks is back. We know that you like the ending of Slott's run, but what did you think about it as a whole?
I think Slott's run was the best example of Spider-Man as a guest star in his own book in the history of forever. And it's kind of one of those things, honestly, where when everyone's Spider-Man, no one's Spider-Man. It's just you end up rooting more for
and you're a Spider-Man, and you're a Spider-Man.
Yeah, it's the Oprah Winfrey meme all over again. It says, hey, everybody's a Spider-Man. So and it all goes back to you may like the character for different reasons, but it all comes back really to Peter Parker is the man underneath the mask. I think for a lot of readers is what really matters. But overall, I think there was a very there's a lot of boring books during that time. There's some bursts of, hey, that's really good, followed by a long silence, and that's probably the best way. And then at the end, like I said, the lead up to 800, I thought was really good and a high note to go out on. So,
all right, so his exit was the best part of the entire run.
Yeah, the best part of Dan Slott's run was when Nick Spencer took over.
Shockingly, I didn't see that one coming, to be completely honest. All right, Doc, we got a new picture about Spider-Man. What are your thoughts about Dan Slott on the Spidey book?
I feel like this photo, which I just stole from Mike Barron, aptly describes. It's a good metaphor for how Slott was what he was trying to do and what he did during his run on Spider-Man. He never quite got it, and he knocked the whole fucking house down before he finally hit it at the end. That's kind of it.
So he also didn't he have Spider-Man like living on his girlfriend's like couch wearing her fucking
that was near the end, yeah.
I remember,
Yeah.
I think I remember seeing it in a Doug video going, man, what a fucking pathetic.
He was also wearing
he was
shirt.
Yeah, he was hanging out on Mockingbird's couch wearing her t-shirt.
She was telling him to go get a fucking job.
Yeah. So yeah, but this, I feel as though this photo is a perfect description of Dan Slott attempting to grasp and handle Spider-Man for the 10 years that he was there, and he knocked down the whole goddamn house to do it.
You know what's interesting about Dan Slott's Amazing Spider-Man is that at the end you had Chip Zdarsky come on Spectacular Spider-Man, and the beginning of his run was rough. I read the first few issues and I was like, this shit ain't funny. Like this is hard to read, but he really got Spider-Man, I think the last maybe year of his run is actually excellent. Like all the stories were great. There was some dimension jumping and all that stuff, and I think everybody was legitimately going, Chip Zdarsky's getting Amazing Spider-Man when they finally boot Dan Slott. This is going to be amazing. He gets the character. He's the right guy for the job. But curiously, they put Nick Spencer on it, and I remember I wasn't a fan of that. I was like, why are they putting Nick Spencer on anything I might ever want to consider reading? And I wouldn't read it, and I refused to until the Hunted story arc, and I finally broke down. I was like, Nick Spencer hasn't been a twat on social media for quite a while. Everyone says the book's good. I was like, I can forgive. I'll remember what he's done, but give it a try. And it turns out his Amazing Spider-Man is very good. Bats, I'm going to have to leave somewhat soon. What are your thoughts on Nick Spencer's Spider-Man? Have you been able to read it yet?
Yeah, so I read up to Hunted, and I dropped off at Hunted. I saw that we're gonna have the Feminist 6 coming, and I'm like, oh, I'm glad I dropped off at the perfect time, where all the great Spider-Man villains are now strong, independent women who don't need no Spider-Man, but they need each other to beat him. I like Nick Spencer's run, but like I said, the stain is still there, and the more I read modern Spider-Man, the more I realize I just don't need modern Spider-Man, that all the good Spider-Man is all before Civil War. And it's pretty much J. Michael Straczynski kind of wraps up Spider-Man perfectly by signing to the devil. And so, yeah, I'm kind of not going to read any more modern Spider-Man. I think the best Spider-Man that's on the shelf right now is Peter David's story that takes place during the 80s.
So the Spider-Man.
Yeah, the Symbiote Spider-Man's really good. But yeah, I think everything else that's on the shelf right now is just pointless paper that melts on the ink melts into your fingers.
Mm-hmm.
I after reading Life Story number 3, I looked at my hands and they were pink, and I was like, "That's not my skin color. I am white, but I'm not that pink." Like it's like, so yeah. There's no good Spider-Man out there right now.
All right.
Other than
so, Doug, Yellow Flash wants to know, what's your thoughts on Nick Spencer's Spider-Man?
So I've said before that Nick Spencer is actually a better writer than Dan Slott, and his handling of Spider-Man is head and shoulders better than Dan Slott. But at the same time, I've gone out of my way to actually not talk about it because of all the things that he said on social media that he's never apologized for. And it's one of those things where when you say that Republicans are evil and you say that it's a myth that there could actually be a good Republican and you never retract that, it's like, yeah, I might like your Spider-Man, but I'm not going to give you any free promotion. I'm not going to do any videos on you. I'm not going to do any blog posts. I'm not going to tweet about you. So, yeah, I can't deny that he's a sharp guy and he gets the book better than Dan, but as a creator, he just alienated me to the point where I'm not going to help him out in any way.
So he burnt that bridge to you as a consumer, or even you as a critic who could praise his comic on the internet and maybe promote it for him, and you're not willing to do that anymore.
I'll do the bare minimum in terms of if people ask me if I think it's better than Dan Slott's run, I will tell them yes. But then it's like I will quickly pivot towards something else, because until the day that he actually apologizes, which I do not believe that he's ever done, if somebody says I'm sorry and they're contrite, then I'm okay. I will. That's no problem at all. But as far as I know, he still believes the exact same thing he did, and it's like, okay, well, you think I'm evil because I think there's problems with. It's not cool that Peter Parker makes a deal with the devil, or because I disagree with you on some sort of random public policy issue, then I'm going to zip my lips when it comes to promoting your book. I'm not going to do it.
All right. Well, is there another, there's 12 Spider-Man books releasing every month right now. Is there one that you do like that you're willing to put your stamp of approval on?
Really, the Amazing Spider-Man is the only one that I collect these days. In Marvel in general, I'm down to the Amazing Spider-Man, Iron Man, and Daredevil, and I don't buy anything else these days.
Well, Daredevil's excellent.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
That's definitely the best book if you ask me. Although I didn't like this week's issue, but that's another subject. So you haven't tried out I would have thought Symbiote Spider-Man would have been like right up your alley. It's more of like, I think it's set in the 90s, right?
It takes place between Secret Wars and him finding out that the suit is an alien.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it's a little bit later.
I think you'd dig it, Doug. It's in that era of good Spider-Man, and it's written by Peter David. So
yeah, I'm just conflicted about Marvel
in
in general. Just the way that they've treated customers, and I don't know. I'm willing to forgive, and I will slowly maybe come back. If guys like you say check out certain runs, then I will probably do so. But
it's a 6-part mini too, so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm in a weird place with my relationship with Marvel these days. That's the best way to put it.
Well, as Wes was saying, like we all thought, Chip Zdarsky was going to take over Amazing Spider-Man. We also thought he was going to take over Fantastic Four and bring him back, and they pulled the rug from under us and gave us Dan Slott. And it's like,
basically,
why?
they just did a shell game with all their shitty writers no one liked. Like, okay, Ta-Nehisi Coates, let's put him on Captain America. Now, Mark Waid, we're going to move him here. And it's like, you didn't promote any of your good writers.
No, they haven't at all, ever. How often do you see, other than for Spider-Man Life Story, which I don't like, is promoted. And it's miniseries. They don't promote. They don't promote anything that's good. It's ridiculous. They'll try to sell you freaking old lady Squirrel Girl before they try to sell you a freaking Daredevil comic written by Zdarsky.
Yeah, it's weird. They don't promote him at all. Even Cates, they haven't even put him on one of their flagship titles. It's really, really weird considering he sells on name alone.
Yeah, Ewing had to turn a title into a flagship title. So maybe that's what they're saying. You got to take this, lower tier character and make them a high tier character, because we're going to give all the high tier books to our buddies who blow us in the cloakroom,
it's
or
the same
our
over
girlfriends or our girlfriend's, boyfriend, or whatever. It's like, oh God.
It's the same at DC. Tom King gets all the recognition. Bendis gets a bunch of recognition. what's her face is on Aquaman, but it's like over, like the best books are Hawkman and Shazam, and it's like no one ever talks about them. Let's just pretend they don't exist because we need we need to get another Batman title by Tom King.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
We
there will
need
be
to put Bendis,
an upcoming
on another Superman book. It's like,
DC grievances video from Thinking Critical soon. Actually, I'm sorry, Bats. You have to check out here in like 4 minutes. Do you want to give some comic book recommendations before you head out?
yeah. So, pretty much anything that has Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in it has been freaking fantastic. Whether it's the regular ongoing, Shredder in Hell, or Batman TMNT, those have all just been all around good and fun, and comics being entertaining, which is mind-boggling in this year. And yeah, pretty much anything Spawn. Well, there's only one Spawn book, but Spawn, anything Turtles, and anything Power Rangers. Those are my go-tos.
All right.
I don't even like
Before you go, say hi to Tim Lim. He's with us now.
Hey, what's up, Tim Lim?
Nice.
Yeah, he's here for Doug.
He's definitely here for Doug, but we appreciate his patronage to the chat and in enjoying and participating. All right, Stacks, what are your thoughts on the current state of? Wait, did I already spin it to you?
No, I haven't got it yet.
All right, what's your thoughts on the current state of Spider-Man? Like, are there too many comic books right now?
There are too many Spider-Man comic books. When everyone's Spider-Man, no one's Spider-Man. I get it with the success of the Spider-Verse movie, trying to capitalize on that. But I pretty much stick to ASM. I've been picking up Symbiote and the Life Story runs. As far as Nick Spencer's run on ASM right now, I'm really enjoying it. Like you were saying earlier, Hunted was a really good storyline. I felt like it was really solid, and I'm interested to see where they're going with this Kindred character. But with Nick Spencer, always in the back of my head, when I get excited for one of his runs, it's just this little whisper in the back of my head going, Hydra Cap. It's just like suddenly we're going to get, Peter Parker just lose his mind or something crazy happening. But so far, I've really enjoyed it. I do wish they would eliminate some of the spin-off titles, like the PS4 spin-off comic.
Why does that even exist?
Yeah, I don't know why that's out there. Just go, but that's where I'm at with it right now.
All right, all of the spiders into the sun.
So, Doc, do you think Hydra Spider is a real possibility for Nick Spencer?
Well, he's already done. Okay, we already have Superior Spider-Man back again. He went from Superior Spider-Man back to Doc Ock, but in a cloned Peter Parker body, and became the Superior Octopus and was a member of Hydra. Yep. And so there's a decent chance of a Hydra Spider-Man now that Doc Ock is back being Superior Spider-Man instead of Superior Octopus. So there's a decent enough chance that, they make, he was already basically almost, Hydra Spider. So,
well, I mean, it kind of fits,
I wouldn't put it past
them. Your multiple legs, and Hydras have multiple heads. So, same thing, right?
It's all related.
Squid, octopus, close enough.
So Namor's involved.
Yeah.
It's a huge conspiracy.
But so, it would not shock me. I mean, I don't trust Nick Spencer. I will never trust Nick Spencer. And I guarantee that the minute everybody starts trusting Nick Spencer, he will do something to tear apart that trust. Because that's what he does.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
So right.
Things have been going too smoothly.
Yes, exactly. and he needs to subvert expectations at some point. I mean, but overall, like the state of
That's
go ahead.
to leave, so we need to say goodbye.
All right. Later,
Thank
man.
you very much for joining us, brother.
Bye,
yeah,
Bats.
I'll see you guys next time. Later.
Take care.
All right, sorry about that, Doc.
Yep. But honestly, no, just start throwing spider people in general into the sun.
Chuck them into the sun. Yeah.
Until the only one left is Peter.
Get the trebuchet.
All right, Pele, you're getting the last word. What are your thoughts on the current state of Spider-Man before we go talk about any other topic?
I keep being told by Marvel that Miles Morales is a great seller and to keep pushing Miles Morales. Diamond keeps telling me Miles Morales is the future of Marvel Comics. He is the future of Spider-Man. You need to sell more Miles Morales. People don't want Miles Morales. People don't want Spider-Gwen. Well, that's not absolutely true, but very few people really want Spider-Gwen. They want Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is Peter Parker. They don't want Ben Reilly. They don't want these other. They want Spider-Man. They want Spider-Man. They want two Spider-Man comics a month. That's good. 2 is a good number. Maybe a Marvel team up with Spider-Man also in the same month. And that's it. And they want their Spider-Man to be Peter Parker. How hard is this to get? I don't understand. I don't know how many times I have to fill out suggestion forms, and other retailers have to fill out suggestion forms for them to stop screwing with Spider-Man. Just write really good Peter Parker stories. That's what we want. That's what sells. Marvel doesn't understand what sells. They don't want what sells. They want what pushes whatever narrative that they're trying to sell behind the scenes, and what's going to be the new progressive, direction. And that's not what customers want. That's not what the average 30, 40-year-old comic buyer who's read Spider-Man his entire life wants. And they're trying to pull in a new pool of buyers that aren't comic customers. And I understand you want to pull in new blood and you want to get new people in to read comics, but you don't do that. You don't alienate your existing customer base just to get those new customers too. It's like, okay, well, we're going to abandon these 10 guys so we can pick up this one new progressive person over here that might buy one issue of Spider-Man every 6 months or every year. And that seems to me, honest to God, that seems to me what Marvel is doing right now. And I don't get it. I just absolutely don't get it. And I've asked people on Twitter and they block me when I ask the questions. They ignore my emails when I send them emails. I don't understand. They don't understand. They don't understand their customer base. And the absolute proof of this is just look at the freaking sales numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Spider-Man is still one of the top selling comic books in all of comic books. Absolutely.
Ongoing series.
I admit that completely. 85, 86,000. What is it? Copies an issue?
I thought it was 89 this last month.
Yeah, something like that. It's 80 something thousand. Okay. It sold 500,000 to 600,000 copies in the 1980s and 90s. That was if Spider-Man dropped below 400,000, something was wrong. Well, now we've dropped below 100,000, and it keeps slipping just a little bit more, no matter if Nick Spencer is headed in the right direction or not. It keeps slipping a few hundred every single issue. This is the problem. You're not giving the customers what the customers want, so the customers are going away. You didn't have a mass exodus. We didn't have, an extinction event where all these 30, 40 something year old guys just died one day. You know, it's not a sudden thing. It's a death by attrition that's happened over the last 25, 30 years, where just another guy leaves, another girl leaves, you know, until finally we are where we are. You have the people who absolutely must have their Amazing Spider-Man, no matter what he looks like and no matter how he acts. And you've got these woke idiots over here that buy 1 or 2 copies whenever they remember to, so they can show their solidarity. And that's the comic industry right now. And I know, and I'm going to also agree with Doc. Nick Spencer's going to fuck something up. You know, pardon my language. He's going to do something. And the fact that it's taken this long, I think, is really impressive. He's really biding his time, waiting in the corner, because invariably, every single time, he does something that breaks a character. And it's coming. I'm just waiting for it. But and when it does, he'll subvert that expectation. You know, we're all going to be sitting over here going, "Yep, told you so." There you have it.
All right, so that's going to wrap up our Spider-Man talk. Tomorrow on this channel, Doc and Pele will be joining myself, comic purse retailer, and Brett R. Smith, a comic industry pro, and we're going to talk some comic industry issues, including this one, which I'm going to throw to Doug, and then Stacks. Actually, you know what? I'm going to send it to Stacks, and then I'm going to send it to Doug, and this is going to be our last topic. Stacks, did you see Dan Didio's comments from San Diego Comic-Con?
I did. I saw it basically saying, "Hey, people tend to buy our old stuff, our facsimile copies, more so than our new stuff." And then he goes on. It's like a 2-part message where he says, "Hey, why are people doing this?" But then rather getting the point that, hey, people actually liked back in the day when heroes were heroes. He goes off on this. We got to push the edge. We got to. It almost comes across as they're buying that stuff because we're not woke enough. It's like, what? That's how I took it. I may be misreading it, but it blew my mind. I'm not even a DC guy, and I'm sitting there just facepalm, going, "What are you doing, dude? This is people just want your heroes being heroes. They don't want sad heroes. They don't want Batman moping around sad for a year plus, and just the reason we're buying the old stuff, the reason back issues are better, is because the heroes are heroes. Period."
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right, Doug. Does DC Comics have a self-awareness issue, and does it reside in Dan Didio?
Based off, so I've always been a Marvel guy, but I do get DC news from you and Professor Geek for sure. And I saw that comment in my Twitter feed right before I was out all night last night. I was seeing a show, Steve Martin, but it showed up in my feed, and I glanced at it really quick, and it's just, yeah, another one of these things where a lot of these guys are ideologues. A lot of these guys are just so out of touch, and instead of admitting when they're wrong, they will always double and triple and quadruple down on wrong instead of admitting that maybe the customers know something that they don't.
Yeah, he said, "It's our fault that people aren't buying our new comic books. We aren't going far enough."
Bastard.
You read the TV wrong, sir.
It's I've said this 1,000 if I've said this once, I've said it 1,000 times. If there's one guarantee in the world other than death and taxes, it's that entertainment companies will learn every single time the wrong goddamn lesson from every bit of data, feedback, and information that the marketplace and end-use customers give them. Every single time. We sat there. How long did we sit there saying, that Hollywood for a long time learned, well, men don't like women action movies. And we said, no, we don't like bad action movies. Mm-hmm. Catwoman was bad. Elektra was bad. Well, we can't make a female superhero movie because people don't go and see it. No, just make a good one. It's not hard. Learn the right lessons. The problem is there's a fundamental problem with it, is that they never are willing to accept that their product is bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, and that's what it comes down to. And Didio's falling into the same trap. He's not accepting the fact that the product is bad. It's just not what we want.
Yeah,
So,
it all starts with him, you know, because he's the co-publisher. He's the one that dictates the direction of the company. People are rejecting it, and they're saying, I would rather spend the same amount of money for a comic book that was already produced that has ads for stuff that doesn't exist anymore than buy what you're selling me today.
I want to see if I can get them sea monkeys.
Yep. I started to get into DC with DC Rebirth, and I really liked it. And then all of a sudden, Bendis came in, and that's when I was like, "Uh-oh, I know this is going to go off the rails." And I jumped ship. And then again, watching your channel, it appears as though I was right. They were going in a direction where I was like, "This is not what DC Rebirth was." That got me, someone who never bought DC, into the company. It was weird.
Yeah.
Well, there's literal DC is filled with literal cuckolds, and they believe that is the way that everyone else in the world likes. You know, I'm sorry, my wife doesn't like BBC. I'm sure that some people do, and they think it's wonderful and everything like that. But I'm not going to sit and watch it happen. You know, I'm not going to volunteer my wife for this.
Hey, we don't need to talk
This is
about
not
that.
what I get into.
That's not even.
This is not what I'm into. But I'll tell you what, that's what those guys, that's what the creators at DC are into. A lot of people at Marvel.
It doesn't matter. I just care if they write good comic books.
Well, and it goes into the comic books too, because they're cucking our characters, and we're tired of it. We're just sick of it. You know, we've had enough.
All right. Pele's too
I had to have my one moment. I had to have my one moment for this comic series.
Time to put a bow on this show. It's time for comic book recommendations. Doug, do you have any comic books to recommend to the audience today?
Yeah, I heard there's this really good book called Soulfinder Demons Match with artist Timothy Lim and covers by Dave Dorman. This is my shameless plug.
Oh, go for it.
For my book.
Go as long as you need to.
Soulfinder Demons Match. Check it out on Indiegogo.
Looks fantastic, man.
All right, so you have an all-star creative team, Doug. How'd you secure all those guys?
That was something that just sort of organically happened over the course of the building of this sort of independent comics movement. Met Tim, and through Tim actually introduced me to both Brett R. Smith and Dave Dorman, basically, and Matt Weldon. So basically, Timothy Lim is like the linchpin of Soulfinder Demons Match. It would not be coming out this year if it wasn't for Tim.
All right, so what's in the envelope that you are holding over Tim at the moment? Is it nudes?
What's that?
Do you have nudes on Tim? Is that how you made him do all this stuff for you?
No, we just get along. We're both Catholic, and we both politically we agree on a number of things, and we actually agree in terms of the classic hero's journey and the craft of storytelling and all that sort of stuff. We're on the same page.
Okay, so you guys are just friends.
It's actually nudes of Tim's bunny.
Oh, damn. That's rough. All right, now that we know what Doug's holding out on over Tim, Stax, what are you recommending for the audience this week?
I'm staying on Guardians of the Galaxy. I know you went off on the cover on Twitter, but on Guardians of the Galaxy number 6, it does look like a bad cover, but the story has been really good so far. Also, Invaders. If you are into Captain America and you don't want to read any Ta-Nehisi Coates nonsense, go pick up Invaders. It's a great storyline featuring Namor. And basically, they're going all-out war with Atlantis. It's been really good. So those are my big two this week.
Awesome. All right. I know this isn't going to be a new comic. Doc, what are you suggesting this week?
I'm going to stick with the Spider-Man theme for the show and go with Adjectiveless Spider-Man issues 1 through 14. It was the whole Todd McFarlane run on the book. You got the starting arc with the lizard. Then you get the arc with Wolverine and the Wendigo, and then you get let's see. I think there was one in between there. I think there was a 2-issue arc in between. Oh yeah, with I think Ghost Rider. And yeah, it's good. And I love that. And then issue 13 has 13 and 14 are Michael Mobius. And the cover for issue 13 is a black suit homage to the cover of number 1. So if you're a big fan of that kind of very iconic Spider-Man number 1 cover, the cover for issue 13 is the same pose, but in the black costume. It's a great book.
Awesome. So I actually started reading Perceptions. You know, I don't remember which issue it is, but it's in the adjective list. Around, like with my son, I can't read this with the kid. This is scaring him. Like, Tom McFarlane's Spider-Man's a little too intense compared to what I've been showing him before. So that was pretty funny.
And the great thing about those issues of 1 through 14, you could basically find them in a dollar bin everywhere. There were so many copies of them.
Mm-hmm. All right, Pele, are you still here?
Yeah. I had to. Something's wrong with my streaming, but yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I thought you got mad at me and jumped off the stream.
No.
In the shop this week.
Recommending Immortal Hulk came out this week. Always pitching it. Always endorsing it. It's really good. I know that Ewing's probably got half of people blocked, but yeah, it's always an eye opener, and that's what I've got right now. Sorry, I've a little bit technical difficulties, but
all right. So there's a new artist on it this week, and I was not impressed.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that kind of slipping.
Yeah, Joe
That's
Bennett.
kind of slipping. Hopefully, we can get Bennett. Hopefully, we can get Bennett back.
But he was doing 2 issues a month for like a year. It was actually pretty shocking that he actually kept it up. So in the comments, we've got FF2 saying House of X, that should be next week. Timothy Lim is saying Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane was released in trade 2 weeks ago. The best modern retelling of Spidey this decade. So if you need your Spidey fix, Tim Lim's saying get Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane. All right, what do we got here? Oh, Sergeant Bats can't believe Mary Jane is getting her own ongoing series. And that looks like it's about it. So me, I didn't really love the Immortal Hulk this week. Daredevil's okay, but these 2 books were fantastic. And this is for you, Dan Didio, because these facsimile editions are better than almost anything being published today. These X-Men books are great. I got another one on order for next week, and I suggest everyone go out there and get your facsimile editions of X-Men. It's better than any X-Men probably the past, how many years, Doc?
Since about 2006, 2007.
All right, there you go. Better than anything in X-Men for the last 12 years. So that should just about wrap everything up. It's time to sign off. Doug, is there anything else you want to talk about your Soul Finder Demons Match campaign you want to sell a little bit harder before we sign off?
I just want to thank everybody for backing the book, and I want to thank Doc for putting us over $25,000, and thank you for having me on twice in the past month here, or whatever it's been. I'm losing track of time. Really appreciate it. And if people are looking for solid art and solid storytelling, classic hero's journey, good versus evil, it's in Soul Finder Demons Match.
Nice, absolutely. And of course, Doug has his own YouTube channel talking about culture war, comics, pop culture, and it's amazing. And he's a great follow on Twitter as well. All right, Stacks. Where can people find you, my friend?
You can find me on Twitter at comic_stacks. Same thing over on Instagram, though I don't do a lot there. And of course, you can come over to my YouTube channel at The Real Comic Stacks. Somebody stole the first one, so I had to become the real one. And appreciate you coming over and checking it out. Thanks for having me on.
Yep, and if you get a chance to watch any of his issues or episodes with Half Stacks, you can see that he is the secondary talent in the family, and his little boy is a much better comic reviewer, in my opinion.
You would be correct. He's got a gift for gab.
All right, Pele, where can people find you, my friend?
You can find me at just_Pele on Instagram and Twitter. And Twitter can get a little bit political. Do talk comics though quite a bit. Instagram is largely new acquisitions and talking about comic covers and the art related to them. So come check it out.
So Doug's partner in crime, Tim Lim, is saying Salamat po, which means thank you very much in Tagalog. All right, who we got left? Doc, where can people find you?
You can just find me on Twitter. It's at Science Jesus. Yeah, I have Instagram, but I'm not giving that out to anybody.
I wouldn't do that either. So, Doug, we have one question from the audience. It's about Candygate. Are you Team Gummy Bears or Team Milky Way?
Oh man, I guess I'd probably have to go with gummy bears instead of. I never really liked Milky Way.
That's why you're my man. Hashtag blame Gummy Bears, baby. These guys will never own it, man. Gummy Bears are the way to go. Doug Kiss confirmed it. If you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. You can also find me here. I got a video pretty much every day, and I got an extra special live stream on the week or tomorrow talking about the comic book industry with Brett R. Smith. We got Comic Perch also coming in, as well as Doc and Pele joining us. Thank you all very much for joining us for this awesome Spider-Man stream. Thank you very much, Doug. It was great having you on. Your wealth of knowledge about Spider-Man, and we all really appreciated it. That should wrap things up. Salamat po, and I'm out.
Adios.
Later, y'all.
All right.